Good evening, guten Wocht, Erev Tov. The time is just gone 7:45, and welcome on behalf of the South African Jewish Report to this evening's broadcast, to the 94th webinar since lockdown began. Now, Dina Diamond, you're looking well and healthy.
Thank you, Howie. Lots of vitamins.
That's the secret to everything in life, I think, lots of vitamins.
I don't know, we'll find out from our panel of experts soon, actually.
So, of course, I have nothing really to say this evening. I'm just here as backup in case you go into labor.
It's very kind of you, and also very kind and very untrue, Howard, because I've never, ever heard you without words to say.
I have collected words over the Shabbos just in case.
Just good, I know, because I know you're very shy and softly spoken.
Shy, unassuming, sweet, demure, and submissive.
Absolutely, and sporting a lovely new jersey, I must tell you.
Thank you. Do you like my new filler collection?
Marvelous. Are you modeling for filler now?
I'm modeling for filler because the Slotskys messaged in the middle of a webinar the other night and said, you really need some new clothing.
Well, you have been on about over 90 webinars. So
94 to be exact. And unlike the diamond collection, I've had to repeat a few outfits.
I feel like you might be a bit more creative, though.
Maybe. Hilit Milner, don't turn off your camera. We're about to start.
Don't go away. Don't be scared of Howie.
I haven't seen you since the time you replicated. How are you?
Good, and you?
How is Junior Milner?
Good. She's cute. She's very good. Thanks.
Do you have any advice for Dina, who is about to go and have more progeny?
I think Dina's the one who's got the advice for me. She's got more kids than I do.
Well, this will, please God, be number 4.
Please God, indeed.
And we
Nicqui,
keep on thinking it could be tonight. It could be tonight. Can you imagine our viewership if Dina gave birth in the middle of our webinar?
I know you think that would be entertaining. I potentially don't.
Nicqui, you don't know us, but this is what happens every time we go on air, and we have
awesome.
pre-show banter until 8 o'clock when we start. But
is this to calm the nerves or to make us more nervous?
Oh, no. This is shock therapy. If you can survive till 8 o'clock, after 8 o'clock, the rest is completely a breeze.
Okay, awesome.
But we've got about 350 people already watching us on Zoom, and many more on YouTube and Facebook as well. And I wanted to call this show "Making Howard Thin and Gorgeous." And Dina told me, yeah, too late, it can't be done. None of you are miracle workers.
Harry, you've been on that train for a long time, since I've known you.
Sorry, what was that, Hilet?
Saying you've been on that train for a long time.
I know, but life is a journey. So are we not going to succeed tonight where we failed on all other attempts?
100%.
No, all the secrets shall be revealed. All our weight loss, nutrition, health secrets will be revealed this evening. We're very excited about it.
So by the end of tonight, I will be much thinner, much more gorgeous, much healthier, and much
full head of hair.
Full hair. It could happen. What about Botox? Are we doing Botox tonight?
We're not, but when Dr. Tarryn gets on from Skin Renewal, you're more than welcome to ask her, because she does recommend a holistic approach, and that might include some little injections.
Nicqui, Nicqui, can I presume that this is not entirely in your way of thinking about what we're going to be discussing tonight?
I'm very open to any way of thinking, actually. And
So
Dina and I had a conversation the other day, and I just have to share, Dina, miraculously, my son his call-up was cancelled. So he didn't go into Gaza at all. So we are just so grateful.
Oh, that's absolutely...
Sorry. Yeah. Dina called as we got the news that he had been called up into Gaza. So, yeah.
And Nicqui was a little bit Like
Straight.
Traumatized.
Not quite as bad as my husband was, but yes, yeah.
You know,
Probably
we had
very
a,
grateful.
we had a webinar on Saturday night called Wake and Bake, or Sunday night. I've lost track of time. Thursday night.
Tonight's Saturday.
And it was called Wake and Bake. And we looked at the medical qualities of marijuana, cannabis, and hallucinogenics.
Mhm.
And we had a professor from Sheba Medical School on, and he was talking about how all of this is being used in the treatment of PTSD in soldiers, which was absolutely fascinating. Professor Tim Noakes, welcome this evening. Welcome back. It's been, I think, almost a year since you were on one of our webinars.
That's right. I remember it with great joy and happiness. It was a super evening, as I remember.
Yeah, I think we had Wade van Niekerk on that one, busy walking
That's
us.
it.
He did meter by meter through his Olympic bid,
That's
or
right.
his 200 meters Olympic win.
That's correct. No, he was superb. Yeah.
Are you involved at all with the South African Olympic team? I believe many of them have left already and are training in Europe before going on to Tokyo.
No, I'm kind of out of that now. Having retired some years ago, I'm a bit out of that. Yeah.
No, what does a retired professor of sports medicine do with his time?
He writes books and he continues to fight the good fight of science.
You've been in quite a battle over the last year or two, though.
Many. It never ends. You know, the distortion of science is everywhere. Science is no longer credible, and that's the real problem. It's been taken over by other interests, and so it's very difficult. Yeah.
By Instagram.
Well, we'll ask this to Tarryn in a second, but don't you think during the era of COVID, we've all become scientific experts in disease management, vaccinations? It's the only thing that in fact,
but the trouble is most of it is false. That's the problem, and that'll come out in due course. Yeah.
So give us your view on vaccines. Tim, have you had a vaccination?
Listen, I won't give my opinion. This is a disease.
I was dying to ask that as well.
This is a disease which has a mortality of 0.3%. 0.3%. In other words, the probability that any of us are going to die from COVID is essentially zero. The risk of the vaccine, if you're my age, is not inconsiderable. And you know, the point about, you must just follow me on Twitter and then you'll get the whole story. Because I put out all the information that the mainstream media suppresses. Do you know, for example, that there are two actions against the British government and against the German government, that this is the new Holocaust? And I mean, I use that word, advisedly in this audience. That what they are doing is the lockdown has caused more harm than anything in the recent past. This is going to come out in the future. It is astonishing how the story's been distorted.
So when you look at the excess death rate in South Africa, which is at the moment about 160,000, do you accept that death rate and most of that as a result of COVID? And does it mean that, in fact, we're probably close to 40 million South Africans who've actually had COVID already? Yeah. Or do you dispute that death rate?
No, I don't go on that route. I look at how many people die every day in South Africa. And what percentage of that is COVID-19? That's the key. That's the key question. Public health is about all diseases. There are 1 million people will die in South Africa of TB and diabetes. Do you ever hear about that? No. Why not? Because it doesn't make somebody money. That's the problem. This vaccine is a $200 to $300 billion industry, which has sprung out of nothing. Yeah, that's the issue.
Okay, interesting perspective. Dr. Tarryn, welcome. Lovely to see you. Where do you join us from?
Hi, I'm joining you from a nice cold Cape Town. I think same as Tim. So yeah.
Cape Town cold.
Rainy.
Pouring with rain today. I have a friend who's busy running the 13 peaks this week.
Oh goodness.
He's going to be cold.
And the pictures today just pouring wet, rain, miserable. I don't know why people do that to themselves.
No, I absolutely love this weather. Having grown up in Natal and the Drakensberg, where it's dry and icy and cold and taps freezing, I don't mind a little bit of rain, but I'm certainly not doing the 13 peaks on this weekend. So yeah, from the comfort of my cozy home, yeah, I'm all good.
So we just got Tim's view on vaccinations. Do you hold a similar view, or do you have a different view?
I think we all
put you on the spot at all.
Yeah,
we're allowed to differ. That's one of the marvels that we have in freedom of speech. I disagree completely with Tim, but that doesn't make his opinion any less or more valid than mine.
Well, I've had the vaccine. I was fortunate enough to get it, or unfortunate. Well, time will tell. Yeah, and I had it for the hope that I can just reduce the symptoms that I may get if I do. So not necessarily death. I'm at a good age, don't have any comorbid illnesses or anything like that. So for me, it's more the reduction of symptoms and those sort of things. I completely agree with Tim where you see, there are other medical conditions that people are dying from that are more prevalent than this virus. And I think a lot of media has been shifted from things like TB, HIV, those illnesses towards COVID, where, they also need to be highlighted. So, yeah.
And of course, obesity, which is one of the key things that we're going to be talking about tonight. There is an obesity pandemic, both in South Africa and around the world.
And the tragedy is, Howard, sorry, can I butt in there?
Absolutely.
The biggest risk factor for this is visceral obesity. Tonight, we're discussing visceral obesity. If you have visceral obesity, your risk of COVID is greatly increased, as I'll show you. It's the single risk factor. You can almost take everything else out. Now, if the governments around the world had been honestly truthful, they would have said, listen, guys, this is a disease that tackles two people, the old and those with visceral obesity. What can we do about age? Nothing. What we can do about visceral obesity? We can prevent it by looking at the food supply in the country and then addressing that. But no one did. No one did. Now, why not?
Tim, tell us, what is visceral obesity? What does that actually mean?
That's the obesity that's in your abdomen. So that's the belly that men get. And that's it. Now, anyone who's got a belly has got medical problems. Now, has anyone ever told anyone that? The most important organ in the body is the visceral fat. That is what kills you. Forget about your heart and the arteries. It all comes from the visceral obesity, which is an organ of destruction in your body. And we feed it every day with the diets that we eat. And no one ever tells you that.
So, Tim, in fact, Dina has a big belly. I don't know if you know, but she is due to give birth in somewhere between about 8:10 and 2 weeks' time.
Fantastic. Good luck, Dina.
Thanks.
I'm hoping that's treatable a bit quicker, so don't worry.
So I don't know. We've got two doctors on the panel. I don't know if either of you have, when last either of you have actually been part of a birth. But we may have to, if suddenly Dina shouts out, bring hot water and towels, and I'm not quite sure why we need hot water and towels, but if she does, the two of you may have to actually talk her through her birth.
It's called get an ambulance or take her to hospital. Know your limits.
What about modern medicine? I'm not one of those doula home birthing kind of people.
So when you see in movies and they shout, bring hot water and towels, why?
Well, those are like the 1920 movies, Howard. But
what do you do with the hot water? Is this like in case you want to have tea in the middle of the birth?
To wash the blood.
Okay.
To protect the linen.
Okay. As long as the linen is protected, the rest of us are okay.
Has that been a question for you for a while?
Over a long time. I want to know, when you gave birth recently, was that like one with doulas and musical instruments and a birthing bath, or was that the Morningside clinic?
No, it was the Park Lane Clinic. I would like the doula side of things, but things didn't go according to plan.
For the Scientology approach, you could have done.
Exactly.
Tim, you're moving lights around the place. Is that in case the electricity goes out?
No, my lights went out, so I've got a sort of torch next to me to try and give some light on the subject.
Okay, well, we're going to ask everyone to turn off your cameras for a few minutes. We're going to do an introduction right now, and we'll get back to you and talk in a few minutes' time, because the time has just gone 8 p.m. And on behalf of the South African Jewish Report, a huge welcome to everyone this evening. I have been joking this evening that I have nothing to say at all, and that Dina is actually running the show, but in case she gives birth in the middle of the show, I'm just here as backup. So Dina, I am like your generator, just in case. But tonight is the 94th webinar that the South African Jewish Report has put on since lockdown began. Dina, what was your favorite?
Sure. I actually, you know what, like if I have to think, I mean, from the Achberg orphans to the Al Mossad spy to just the stories that we've heard from the tsunamis and the entertainment and I literally, like, there have been so many outstanding webinars, and we've had such amazing people on each. I mean, we had Tito Mboweni, Tuli Maronsela. We've had such phenomenal speakers on all of our panels that it is very, very hard to choose, because we've had every single genre that we could possibly imagine.
I think one of my favorite moments was Tito Mboweni explaining to us how he makes a dessert that he calls a banana split. And you take a banana and you cut it down the middle and you add ice cream, and that was his invention, a banana split.
No, I quite liked his comments about a duck not being a chicken, not being a flamingo.
Yes, for those people who didn't watch it, and all of our videos are available on YouTube, so look for the SA Jewish Report YouTube channel. But in answer to my question of why we had spent 10 billion Rand on South African Airways, knowing that it would probably never ever fly again, his answer was, well, some birds are ducks, and some birds are chickens, and some birds are flamingos, and some birds are meant to fly, and some birds not. So it was an interesting evening, but welcome to all of you to the 94th webinar of lockdown. And if you haven't picked up your latest edition of the South African Jewish Report, the latest edition is out. It's got to do with the war taking place in the Middle East this week, what's really happening. Paula Slier, the Middle East correspondent of Russian television, who is also a writer for the South African Jewish Report, she tries to get rid of all the propaganda and the nonsense and deal with the facts. And she describes what's actually happening day by day. She lives in Ramat Gan. I actually messaged her earlier because there were 2 missiles aimed at Ramat Gan. One person killed in Ramat Gan today by a missile fired from Gaza at civilians in Israel. And I messaged Paula to check she was okay, and she was absolutely fine. So thank goodness for that. We're very grateful to hear that. So pick up your copy of the Jewish Report at your local Discam, Clicks, Spar, Checkers, Exclusive Books, CNA, Pick and Pay, Hypermarket, Shul, School, Garage Shop. They're all over. Or alternatively, go and look online at www.sajr.co.za. Because it's Yom Tov this week, it's Shavuot starting, in fact, tomorrow night. We're not going to be publishing a hard copy edition this week, but look out, we may do a newsletter if there's any breaking news this week. So there's going to be no print edition of the South African Jewish Report newspaper this week. We'll be back the following week. But of course, we do have a webinar coming up on Thursday evening. And on Thursday evening, we're going to be looking at how do you live with crumbling infrastructure? What happens when there are potholes in your roads, the electricity isn't working, there's no water outside or coming into your home, the waste pickers or the pick it up are not collecting? How do we actually live in a society like that? How do we look after our own security, our ambulance services, our roads, our electricity, our water, all of that? And we're going to be discussing that on Thursday evening when we do How to Live with Crumbling Infrastructure. So Danny Kador, you are on controls this evening. Please put on your camera. Let's wave at everyone together with Britt Landsman. And Danny and Britt, people will be asking questions. Hello, Britt. People will be asking questions and putting them into the Q&A section. If you're busy watching on Zoom, please use the Q&A section. If you're watching on YouTube or either of our 2 channels we use on Facebook, comment there as well, and Britt will be picking up those questions and moving them across so we can try to get as many of your questions answered this evening as possible. Danny, we've been counting down with you till the Festival of Shavuot, which is tomorrow night. So how many days are we today?
49, Howard, 49.
49, and tomorrow we start the festival, which commemorates the giving of the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai. That's Shavuot, big festival tomorrow night. People eating lots of dairy products because they didn't know the rules of kosher slaughter.
My mother was busy baking as we speak in my kitchen. She's very busy.
Fantastic. So thank you to both of you, and thank you for making sure that all the questions that people will be putting out tonight, whether they're on YouTube, Zoom, or Facebook, get answered this evening. So thanks, guys. And very importantly, I know we have differences of opinion on our panel, but I've certainly been a big proponent of making sure that everyone in our community who wants a vaccine gets vaccinated as soon as possible. And a reminder to everyone, if you're above the age of 60, you are eligible to get a COVID vaccine starting on Monday. Danny, if I can ask you just to put up the registration details. If you haven't registered yet, please, I beg, I beseech you, put your name down, make yourself eligible to get a vaccination, because the vaccinations are starting on Monday. I know a lot of people watching us this evening, I have in fact already registered, and I'd love to know from people, if you could just mark into the chat section, if you could just mark, number 1, have you registered? And number 2, if you're above 60 and have registered, whether you've received an SMS from government yet telling you where and when to go in order to get your vaccination. Because they were supposed to start sending out this morning, and I don't think anyone has received, at least no one has told me that they've received yet an SMS from government telling them that they should go and get a vaccination this evening. So if I could ask you in the chat section on Zoom, YouTube, and Facebook, just to let us know if you've in fact received anything from anyone, if you're above the age of 60, telling you on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday where you can go to get your vaccination. Danny, you've put the link to register into the chat section. So if you're above the age of 60 and you haven't yet registered, I certainly absolutely urge you to be able to do that. And just before we begin, you know, what we're doing at the moment is trying to build community. In the South African Jewish Report, we've published for 23 years, we've published a newspaper, we've run now 94 different webinars during lockdown. We would love your support to be able to continue to do this. So a newspaper costs us about 550,000 Rand every month to put out, to deliver to your homes, to publish thousands and thousands of editions, to deliver them to your townhouses, to your shops, to your apartment buildings. And in order to help us, we would love you to join in our patron campaign. Now, and every time we do this, we give away, last week we gave away cookbooks for people who joined this evening. On Thursday evening, where we did our weed and psychedelic webinar, we gave away 4 vouchers to people who had signed up that night, and we'll announce the 4 winners. Tonight we have some giveaways as well. We also last week gave away 2 nights for 2 people at Mdluli Safari Lodge to anyone who joined the patron campaign that evening when we discussed international travel. And a huge congratulations to Anita Worrell, who was the winner of 2 nights for 2 people, midweek luxury safari at Mdluli Lodge at Kruger Park. So huge congratulations to all of you. Danny, just show us a quick video about the patron campaign, please. Thanks, Danny. We're going to give everyone an opportunity to sign up this week, tonight, a little later tonight, and we've got some amazing giveaways for people who sign up to the patron campaign this evening. So Dina, tonight you have to make me thin, healthy, and gorgeous. How are you going to do that?
Oh, it's too late. You already are. So, although, I mean, I think with people keep dropping food at your house, I think that's been the biggest challenge that you may have on your diet. But we have got 4 unbelievable health experts tonight. I mean, we have got Professor Tim Noakes, we have got Nicqui Grant, we've got Dr. Tarryn Christie, we've got Hillet Milner. We have got really people who know about holistic nutrition, about diet. It's not about fad diets anymore. It's not about crash course eating. It's not about like a once off. It's about really looking at you holistically as an individual, what your own needs are. There's not one solution that fits all. And I think our panel tonight is going to be very, very interesting. And I think if people really listen and take it in, then they're going to learn a lot. And not only that, but the questions are already rolling in about nutrition and health. So I have a feeling it's going to be a very, very interesting evening. And I know that Professor Tim Noakes has already got a plenty of actually things to say. Which are always, contentious, not contentious. We love and we welcome all of it. So, Professor Tim Noakes, it's lovely to have you with us this evening.
Thanks, Dina. Can we get my slides up? Then I can really start talking properly. Thank you, everyone. So I base my advice on the physiological basis. This is not it's not something I dreamed up. This is how the human body works. And that's what I want people to understand tonight. You have to understand how your body works. And if your body works in a particular way, like mine does, and you eat the diet that we're told to eat, you will develop diabetes. That's what the outcome will be. And you're very likely at risk of cancer and a few other things. If you are fortunate that you're in the 10 or 12%, or let's say 20% of people whose biology is different, you can choose to eat what you like, almost. And that's the key difference. You have to understand that the advice that is currently given fits less than 20% of the population. Those are the dietary guidelines that we have. They fit 20% of the population. If you fit into that, you'll be fantastic. And you'll never understand why Noakes talks as he does. But if you belong to the 80% who have a different biology, you will either learn that what I'm saying is true, or you will suffer the consequences. Okay, so many people know that I wrote this book, and it caused me to develop type 2 diabetes because it promoted a high carbohydrate diet. And I was very fortunate 11 years ago to read this book. Next slide, please. By Eric Westman, the book on the right, The New Atkins for the New You, which introduced me to the Dr. Atkins diet. Now, you have to remember that at that time, I said if we told people to eat a high-fat diet, that would kill them, their arteries would clog up and so on. So it was a huge jump for me, and I made it 11 years ago, and it completely revitalized my life. As a 71-year-old, I'm living a second life. And I can't tell you how important that is. I should be, if I'd followed conventional advice, I would be 130 kilograms. I'd be injecting insulin 2 or 3 times a day. I probably would have lost a leg by now, and I might have had kidney failure. But I'm not, because I understood my biology and I understood what was killing me. Next slide, please. So in the process, we wrote this book, The Real Meal Revolution, and that caused me huge problems. And all the problems that have happened to me since were caused by this. But it wasn't problems. It was, in fact, a new life, which was really exciting. Next, if you just touch the screen, touch it again. And the next slide. So, sorry, if you'll come back one slide. Thank you. Now, what this book says is this, and this is why I got into trouble. Now, the question is this true or not? And that's what we're going to address. Perhaps the most important idea in the book is the idea that insulin resistance is the hidden metabolic abnormality underlying many of the chronic diseases reaching epidemic proportions in modern humans, and which include obesity, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high blood cholesterol concentrations, and heart disease. Now, if that is true, it undermines the entire way we treat patients. Because what it suggests is if you have insulin resistance and you eat the diet that you prescribed and you take the medications, they're not going to work for you, because this is not a problem of absence of pharmacological medications. This is a problem of the incorrect diet. And tonight I'm going to show you, if you have insulin resistance, what you have to eat. Next slide, please. So as a consequence of telling that truth, my profession and my university went against me. I was put I was charged with unprofessional conduct by the Health Professions Council of South Africa. I was involved in a 4-year trial, 28 days in court, where I gave 7,000 pages of evidence, and eventually I won the court 13-0. We won all decisions, and it's described in this book, The Law of Nutrition, which is available in South Africa. The Real Food on Trial is available in Europe and America. And notice it says how the diet dictators tried to destroy a top scientist, and that's what the whole story is all about. But fortunately, I survived. We won. It's over. And now the message that I have for you, every day, I promise you, it becomes stronger. The evidence becomes stronger. Next slide, please. So we also wrote recently the Eat Right Revolution. That's just come out a few weeks ago. And this is a very brief story about insulin resistance and how the dietary guidelines were completely fabricated. They are wrong, and they've been disproven repeatedly. And that if you have insulin resistance, you are going to struggle if you follow that conventional dietary advice. Next slide, please. So here's the picture that you need to understand. Above the surface, we have the iceberg, which you see what's sticking out above the surface, and below there's something else. Now, above the surface, you'll see we have arterial disease, obesity, hypertension, dementia, and a thing we call non-alcoholic fatty liver disease with atherogenic abnormalities in blood lipid concentrations. Now, you will all recognize that you have a doctor for each of these conditions. If you had hypertension, you wouldn't see the same doctor as if you had obesity, and the same with arterial disease. Now, the problem is all these diseases are exactly the same. The cause is the same. Therefore, you only need to understand one condition, you'll understand all of these. So let's look at what that condition is. What is underlying it? Next slide, next touch, please. This is the problem, it's insulin resistance. And if you're on the right of the slide, you're carbohydrate tolerant and you can afford to eat as much carbohydrate as you like, as long as it provides all the nutrients you need as well. But if you're like me and you're not on the extreme left, you're carbohydrate intolerant. And if you eat a high carbohydrate diet, you will develop type 2 diabetes like I did, and a whole other conditions. So if you'll just press it one more time. So if you're on the right, you'll be insulin sensitive and you'll be an athlete and you'll have a normal body weight and you'll be fantastic. And you'll never understand why people have problems with diets, because you'll never have a problem. But come to the left. Next slide, please. If you're on the left, these are the conditions which you will develop in time if you eat the wrong diet. Hypertension, obesity, metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, polycystic ovarian syndrome, gallstone disease, gastroesophageal reflux disease, and importantly, cancer. We're now realizing the key driver of cancer is insulin resistance. And that is, it's not going to be, can't be ignored for too much longer. How do we know if you're insulin resistant or insulin sensitive? Next slide, please. We measure a thing called your glycated hemoglobin, or HbA1c. If your value is 4.5, you are unbelievable. You're going to be very healthy and you don't have to worry. Next slide. But if your value is 5.5, you have diabetes, but you will not be told that, because you'll only be told that you have diabetes when your HbA1c reaches 6.5. Next slide, please. But the problem is, if your value is 5.5 and you continue to eat a high carbohydrate diet, you will ultimately get to a value of 6.5. Sorry, can you press that? There we go. So this is the difference. Now, what we do in medicine is we allow the insulin-resistant people to continue to eat a high carbohydrate diet, which gives them an HbA1c of 5.5, 5.6, 5.7. And we say, well, you're not quite diabetic. It's not great, but you're not diabetic. And the answer is you're on the way. And once you reach 6.5, only then do we make a diagnosis and put you on insulin. And the reality is we can reverse all of this. We can get your HbA1c from 6.5 down to 5.5 or lower by changing your diet. And that's critical. Next slide. So these are all the conditions that are linked to insulin resistance. And the key point is that you never told that. We don't teach it in our medical school. But the evidence is absolutely abundantly clear in the literature if one reads the literature. This is not fake news. This is the truth. So you have to ask, why didn't you get the truth? And that'll take another couple of hours. Next slide, please. So here they are. These are all the conditions that are linked to insulin resistance, and that's basically medicine. So I know you're going to say, but how can you say that all of medicine or chronic disease is linked to diet? But that's what, or to insulin resistance, but that's what the evidence shows. And so I give you the science, and I gave the science for, as I said, for 12 days in my trial under oath, and it was proven correct. Next slide, please. So now this is the really complex slide. Now, all of you, I'm sure, listening to this have been told it's your cholesterol that's going to kill you. And that is nonsense. This is what kills you. And you can see cholesterol in the middle a little bit, but there's everything else. Now, if we start on the top left with this rather obese person, once you ingest too many calories, this is what happens to the storage of those calories. You either store it as subcutaneous fat, which is entirely safe, no problem. So the fat that you store underneath the skin is fine, but the problem is the fat that you don't store under the skin, you store in the abdomen, causes these fat cells to get too fat. And once they get too fat, they cause everything else on this slide. And if you look at the middle, that says metabolic syndrome, which is central obesity. That's obesity, which is in the abdomen, causes you to have a thick waist. So as your waist expands, that indicates you've got central obesity. And central obesity is epidemic in South Africa. And if you have central obesity, this is what's happening to you every single moment of your life. And it's not good. You get high blood pressure, you get type 2 diabetes, and you get atherogenic dyslipidemia, which is the real abnormal lipid values that cause arterial damage. It's not cholesterol. It's all these other things happening. Now, what happens? How do we treat this today? Well, we say, oh, you're obese, so you must eat fewer calories, and you must exercise more, and you must take a statin. And unfortunately, it doesn't work because that's not the treatment. Just remember, and we'll come back to that, hunger causes obesity. And you have to understand hunger and how you people are not hungry. That's the key. So the way we reverse this is we get this guy onto a low carbohydrate diet, which satiates and takes away hunger, and then everything falls in place. So that's critical. So look at this slide, and the next time you're prescribed a statin to lower your cholesterol, you say, yes, doctor, but what's that doing to my visceral obesity? What's that doing for my inflammatory response? What's that doing to my high insulin and my high glucose and my low HDL and my high triglycerides? And those are the questions I pose in the latest book. Next slide, we're coming to a rapid conclusion. Now, what this slide shows is how your insulin resistance develops and the characteristics. And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes 50 or 60 years. So if you start on the left, we have all these different changes in the body as you age and you become increasingly insulin resistant. And if you look, for example, your arterial blood pressure starts to rise in your 30s, that's an indication of insulin resistance. We detect it by measuring your blood insulin concentration. That's the key. That's B on this slide. But it's never tested. So as soon as your fasting blood insulin concentration starts to rise, you are showing evidence of insulin resistance. But the best test is to measure your insulin concentration when you have a glucose tolerance test, and we measure insulin 2 hours after you've taken the glucose. And you can see that is the change that occurs early on in this disease. So if you want to really know if you've got insulin resistance, you need to know your fasting insulin, you need to know your 2-hour blood insulin and your blood triglyceride concentrations. Those will help you decide. Next slide, please. Sorry, it may well be that you can't hear me, but if I could have the next slide. There we go. Now I'm quickly bringing it back to COVID-19. A brilliant study was published recently about about deaths from COVID. Now, these are risk factors for fatal coronavirus infections in the Western Cape. And on the left is female and male, and then in green are the different ages. And you can see after 70, you're at quite high risk. Let's skip over to the green value. That's high blood pressure, chronic kidney disease, chronic lung disease, and other conditions, tuberculosis and HIV. And can you see those are quite small risk? So this study tried to show that tuberculosis and HIV would be key risk factors for fatal COVID. No. What is it? HbA1c greater than 9, which equals diabetes. That's the second tallest column with 12,07. That means if you have type 2 diabetes, which is uncontrolled, your risk of a fatal COVID outcome is horrendous. And we now know it's not the type 2 diabetes, it's the presence of visceral obesity. And there you go. Now, as I say, if people were really concerned for your health and were giving you ideal advice, they would have said, let's use this COVID to make people healthy by telling them they've got to reverse their diabetes. No one said it. You have to ask why. Next slide, please. So in South Africa, type 2 diabetes is by far the most common modifiable risk factor of fatal COVID-19 outcome. And that's what people need to be told. Use this chance to reverse your type 2 diabetes so that you can become resistant to COVID, because there are going to be more infections in future. This COVID targets people with type 2 diabetes. Next slide, please. And this is just the second last slide, just to show you, this is your HbA1c values. And remember, we like a value below 6.5, which means you're not diabetic. And this shows that there are three studies in the literature showing you can reverse your diabetes with a low carbohydrate ketogenic diet. And that is unbelievable, because we've been told that diabetes is irreversible chronic disease. And here's my final slide. And this slide has just been published in work coming out recently. And this was a study of a women's health study from Boston, and it's a 21-year follow-up of a couple of tens of thousands of women who were studied over a period to see what caused what caused heart attacks. So remember, you've been told it's cholesterol. Okay, so let's look at it. So the top is the risk factor. And what is the risk factor? That increases your risk 10,71 fold, which is enormous. It's type 2 diabetes, followed by metabolic syndrome, followed by hypertension, followed by obesity, which are all markers of insulin resistance. Then we look at the blood tests, and you go to the LDL cholesterol, is what your doctor measures in you to tell you whether you can have a heart attack or not. See the risk, their value is 1,38, the risk ratio. That is irrelevant. It's completely hopeless. So if you want to know if you're going to have a heart attack in the future and develop coronary heart disease, it's all linked to insulin resistance and diabetes. And that's what we have to look at. So the diet that you should be eating is the one that prevents you getting type 2 diabetes. Simple as that. Thanks very much.
Sure. Okay. So I think we've taken a lot out of that. I mean, obviously what you're saying is, so a lot of people are concerned about their, as you say, their cholesterol levels and all of that. So now you're saying we should be worried about our diabetes. Have we lost Professor Noakes?
No, we're here. I'm back again. So let me, there we go.
No, you can't run away, not after giving us that.
So the guy called Kraft, who published papers in the 1970s, and he said, you do not have arterial disease, heart attacks without diabetes. He said diabetes is the number one. It's taken us 40 years to get back to that. If you have heart disease, you have diabetes. By that, I mean arterial coronary artery disease. You have diabetes. It may not have been diagnosed because they didn't measure your insulin, as I showed you, 2 hours after a glucose tolerance test. And there are some people who can secrete lots of insulin, they can hide their glucose intolerance. But as the moment you check the insulin, now, the key is that every time you have carbohydrates and you're insulin resistant and your glucose goes up and your insulin spikes, that's what damages the arteries and damages your brain and fuels cancer cells, because they love glucose and they love insulin, and they just take that glucose and grow bigger. So that's why the insulin resistance is so important.
So Tim, can I ask just practically, how do I know if I'm in the 20% who are carbohydrate tolerant or in the 80% that are not? What do I practically, physically do to work out in which category I fall?
Have you got a piece of string?
I can get one.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. What I want you to do is put it around your tummy at your, you may not want to do this test, okay, because this is the critical test. I'll tell you what you do for everyone else. You take a string, You wrap it around your tummy at your belly button, and then you make it twice as long. And it has to be taller than you. The total string length must be taller than you. If it's not, it means your waist is more than twice or is greater than twice of your height. And that's a problem. So the waist to height ratio must be less than 1 to 2. It must be less than 50%. That's the key. That's one of the best measures. Okay, that's a simple test. So your waist circumference is critical. Then you go and measure your HDL cholesterol, your triglycerides, the HbA1c, and insulin and a glucose tolerance test if you really want to get detailed. And those are the tests no one ever talks about.
So now I've had those. So now, in terms of what we should be eating, so just so you know, the cauliflower rice is my favorite. But you've definitely gone on a journey, it sounds like, in terms of your thought processes, in terms of your theories. So you definitely believe that where you've landed is correct, I'm assuming.
Well, now let me just tell you this. It's not only correct, it's helped literally millions of people around the world. That book has had a massive impact. You know, there's a Banting 7-day meal plan Facebook page in Cape Town. It has 2 million subscribers. That's in South Africa alone. This diet has caused more people to regain their health than anything else I know about.
So when we look at the Banting, obviously there's levels of the Banting. So you talk about low carbs, high protein, and but also obviously that there can be an effect in terms of the fat. So depending, there's levels of fat. There's steak, or there's cream. So where have you landed in terms of how high that fat content should be?
Okay, so let me start with an interesting story. So I work out in gym, and I noticed the one lady was becoming thinner and thinner and looking more masculine. In other words, she was losing all her subcutaneous fat and becoming very muscular, becoming highly refined. Her body, you could see it, amazing. And I asked her, how much protein are you eating? And she said, I'm eating 60% protein. Now, normally we prescribe 30% protein. And she said, the more protein I ate, the thinner I got. There's a movement that protein for some people is very important. So when we say that you should eat a low carbohydrate diet, we don't debate that. Everyone knows that the more diabetic you are, the lower the carbohydrate must come. The question now is how much fat and how much protein. In the book, you'll see it focuses on fat, and that's wrong. Not everyone can eat all the fat we were prescribing. They don't lose weight, they stick, and particularly women get stuck. And for them, eating more protein, increasing the protein intake is very helpful. The problem is it's very difficult to get protein from all the sources. You have to eat a lot of fish, a lot of lean meat, and those are, not everyone has access to those. So that's the question. The question is, how much fat and how much protein should you be eating?
So Tim, if we can turn to some of the questions that are coming in from members of the audience. The one question from Michael Levy, it says, how do you ensure that you have enough fiber in your diet if you go onto a low carb diet?
That's fine, because you can eat vegetables. You can eat quite a lot of vegetables, just as long as you don't eat the starchy vegetables. So you can have a lot of the leafy vegetables, and you can eat as much as you like, and you can get plenty of fiber on this diet. In fact, many people increase their fiber content on this diet, so it's easy to do. Just don't eat potatoes and bread and rice and grains, which have a little bit of fiber but have far too much carbohydrate.
So Tim, maybe you can just give us some advice on that, because I think people know pasta, rice, potatoes are carbohydrates, but what are the other things? Because the hidden carbohydrates, I also have your recipe book there, and I've come to see you speak many times, but things like onions are full of sugar, and carrots. What are those things that people presume are in fact good and healthy for them, but maybe very high in carbohydrates?
Yeah. That's a great question, and thank you for it, Howard. Actually, the truth is it's ultra-processed foods that are the problem. So in other words, if I could get you off all the not you, but anyone, off all the ultra-processed
Not just
foods,
you, Howard.
And me, it's okay.
If I could get all the people who have concerns about their health, stop eating ultra-processed foods and eating the foods that we prescribe, the real foods. And this is what I eat, just to make it easy: eggs, meat, fish, dairy, and nuts, and some vegetables. That's what I eat. So if you choose from those 6, you're fine. But those are, none of them are highly processed. And that's the key. It's the ultra processed foods that are the real killer, because they're full of sugar, and they're also designed to make you want more and more and more. So to answer your question, if you were eating a real food diet, I wouldn't worry that you've got a few more carrots or tomatoes or onions. That's not going to be a problem for me. I want you to get off the grains and get off the fruits. The fruit is a problem. And get off the ultra processed foods, and your health and the way you feel will just improve immediately. So that's the key. I wouldn't worry too much about which are the bad vegetables and which are the good vegetables. I've given you a general rule: leafy vegetables, not starchy vegetables. But I'm not concerned about the vegetables. We're actually focusing on the ultra processed foods, which you buy at the supermarket. Those are the foods you want to avoid.
But you're saying the fruit as well. Obviously,
Absolutely.
there's not the fruit of high sugar.
Fruit used to be sour and small and full of fiber and very little sugar or fructose in it. Now it's the opposite. It's designed to make you addicted to it. So that fruit, unfortunately, once you're diabetic, it's gone. But if you really want to control your weight and lose a substantial amount of weight, fruit also has to go. And fruit drinks, of course.
So
Yeah.
Dina, probably about 15 years ago, I was sitting in my office, and I was on Tim's diet, and it suddenly occurred to me an issue of sweeteners. And one of the reasons why I became such a massive fan was I mailed him. I looked up his email address. I think he was still at UCT at the time, and I sent you a mail, and I said, "What about sweeteners?" And you replied literally within 10 seconds, "No." And I said, "Is that because they'll kill me or because they'll make me fat?" And you said they'll definitely kill you. But I see Patrick has asked a similar question. What's the bottom line on sweeteners?
Now, sweeteners are no good because they also act in the brain, and they say they make you addicted. That's the key. The key is addiction. We're realizing that obesity is, I've mentioned, it's a hunger problem, but the hunger problem is caused by these addictive foods that we eat, and those foods are tailor-made to make you want more of them, and that's the key. So the food industry, the ultra-processed food industry, has for the past 20 years been developing foods that are completely, you can't avoid them, you have to eat them. And that's the key. And so, I must tell you that I spoke to a guy who lost 400 pounds. 400 pounds. He weighed over 650 pounds. He's still a big guy by normal terms. And I said, "Tell me, what was it like when you were 600 pounds? He said, "I was forever hungry." He said, "I could eat everything, and 30 minutes later, I'd be hungry." And that's the key. That's the key to understanding your health. You have to eat foods that satiate you completely and that they give you lots of nutrients. We want lots of nutrients and lots of satiety, and that's the diet that really cures the problems.
Yeah, because there's a question also coming in as to what is ultra processed, and someone's saying, are protein powders like Future Life, etc., regarded as ultra processed?
Yeah, I've cut out, so I maybe can't hear. Protein powders are fine. Particularly the whey protein is perfect. I'm not so sure about pea protein because whey protein is from milk and it's a high quality protein. And the fact you're quite correct, it is highly processed. So I don't know how much you heard of that. But I was saying that whey protein is fine because it's from milk, and of course it's highly processed, but you're just getting the important protein. Now
And
I'm
soy
talking
protein.
about,
Yeah.
sorry?
Soy protein. I know, like in Future Life is soy
Yeah, I
protein.
wouldn't go with soy protein. Soy has got all sorts of problems with it, so it's not one we advise. I'd much prefer whey.
Okay, I mean, there's so many questions coming in, Howie. I know that we've got to get to all of our panelists.
So Tim, let's try get through as many of these with as quick an answer as possible.
Great.
One question's come in. Is there any benefits to eating cinnamon?
There's no reason why you shouldn't.
No, but any reason you should?
Extra benefits.
No, I don't know that there's any evidence for that. We don't have evidence for everything. So there's no scientific evidence for value.
Okay. Monica wants to know about alcohol. I'm sure she's busy watching with a glass of wine in her hand at the moment. Is alcohol good, bad? Must you cut it out completely?
Monica, it really matters if you have type 2 diabetes or if you're insulin resistant, and if you really want to lose weight, and if your glucose is out of control, yes, you've got to stop alcohol. But if you're healthy, generally healthy, no, it's fine.
What about, are all fruits bad for you? What about berries?
Berries, correct. Those are the lowest carbohydrate content and lots of fiber and other nutrients. They're the only fruit that's really healthy.
A question about xylitol. Is it the same as other sweeteners?
Yes, they're all the same. They just promote the addiction.
Proteins for vegans, what would you recommend?
Yeah, that's a real big problem. You've mentioned soy. You have to go with soy. If you could eat whey, that would be fantastic. The key, you can be a very healthy vegetarian, but it really helps if you just eat some eggs, because eggs are just nature's vitamin and mineral tonic. So that's the one. But it's difficult to get the best protein, because the best protein, unfortunately, does come from animals. And the vegetable proteins come with carbohydrates. So that's the problem. So the beans, the legumes have good quality protein, but they come with so much carbohydrate that it's difficult for people like myself who are insulin resistant.
So Tim, a doctor has just messaged me and he said, what about refined versus non-refined carbs? Is brown rice still bad for you?
Yeah, it is. You still get the high glucose response. So that's a good question. No, it's not good. If you've got to cut the carbs, you've got to cut the cereals and grains. It doesn't matter what type of grain you're eating. They're going to harm you.
Colette is asking if bananas are bad for you. I seem to remember bananas are actually evil.
They're evil. They're just like spooning sugar into your mouth. I mean, you might as well just take a spoon of sugar and put it in your mouth. Or not 1, 10 or 12.
Right. But so Tim, so just this is on the side. I know this hasn't come in, but I know that you're a runner and obviously you run these marathons. I know you've run the Comrades 7 times. I mean, I still don't understand it, but we'll move on. What energy though? If you do a lot of sport, then is there a level of carbohydrates that you're allowed? Are you allowed an odd banana?
No, you don't need it. You see, once you adapt your body to burn fat, we've all got so much fat. Doesn't matter how thin you are. Even the lady I spoke to you about, who looks amazing, she's still got enough fat to give her all the energy needs for days and days of exercise. So we try to get people fat adapted, and they just burn fat, and then you don't need carbohydrates. You generate all the carbohydrate you need from your liver, from other proteins and fats. You do not need any carbohydrates, and there's really no evidence that high carbohydrate diets make you a better runner. That evidence is not there.
So Tim, when people go shopping, is the idea is you take a packet of whatever you do and you look for the carb content per 100 grams on it. What is that level? What is good and what is bad?
Anything below 5 grams per serving. That's what we would go for. We promote that. But the problem is once it's got numbers on it, you shouldn't be eating it. That's the problem, because that's processed foods. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to have to, I know there's so many questions, but we've got to get all our speakers. We're going to come back. We're going to do more Q&A. But
may I just ask Tim one question? Because I went to hear you speak many years ago, and you were speaking about gut health as the future of medicine. And fecal transplants, and how in fact the world of medicine will change as a result of what we're learning. Can you just give us 2 minutes on that before we move on to Dina's next guest?
Yeah, I think that's a hidden area. It's being realized that the bacteria you have in your gut, there's more bacteria there than your own cells. So it's a huge contribution to your health. We know that those bacteria generate different substances and maybe important vitamins and so on. And so the old idea that everything in your diet comes from what you eat is not true, because the bacteria are doing things as well. We now know that the gut speaks to the brain, and that what you're eating can influence your brain function and your moods and everything like that. So the problem is that there are so many trillions of bacteria that we really don't know which are the optimum composition of the bacteria in your gut. It's largely guesswork. And what's happening is, if I, as a person who's promoting a high-fat diet, I will do an experiment and I'll find these bacteria. I'll say, you see, those are the bacteria you need, because it proves the high-fat diet's good for you. Person who's a vegan will say, no, that these are the bacteria that the vegan has, and that's why veganism is so good. We simply don't know at the moment.
There's actually a question on vitamins and minerals, which actually talk to that. So are you saying a probiotic is probably a great thing to have?
Yeah, I do think that our diets, the food, the nutrient density of the food is worse than it was 100 years ago because the soil's degenerated. And I do think that we do need to start moving to using supplements. And probiotics is a good start. I think there are other things. You know, vitamin D is unbelievably important. And I didn't realize that vitamin D deficiency and folate deficiency are two key deficiencies that really need to be addressed. And I can off the bat say that's what people should be eating. And if you're vegetarian, you need B12. So, and then there's magnesium and zinc, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. And the idea that our diet can be perfect, even if it's the diet I'm prescribing, I don't believe that. I think we can still benefit by a few more supplements along the way.
Dina, can we slip in one question on intermittent fasting? And then I promise I won't slip in anymore.
We can. And listen, I know we could speak for hours and hours. Okay, go for it.
Yeah, intermittent fasting is terribly important. So I think the best way to eat is you eat in an 8-hour window and you don't eat for 16 hours. And I mean, it's not absolute, you know, it's not 8 or 9 or 10. I mean, you understand that you eat in a period and then from dinner to mid-lunch the next day, you don't eat. And I think that's the way to eat. It's to eat one big meal a day plus one smaller meal. And that's the way we should eat. That's how humans are designed. We're not designed to eat every 6 hours. That's a disaster for us.
Well, I currently am. But no, Tim, thank you so much. I mean, there literally are so many questions. There are questions on nuts, there are questions on avos, there's questions on lactose intolerance. I mean, I don't even know where to go. But however, we are going to have to come back. So Professor Noakes, please do stay with us, and we will come back also for some rapid fire questions at the end. But we are going to have to move on, although I know, again, hours we could be here for. But we've got a lot of sponsors this evening, and we'd like to thank them, obviously, for their continuous support of the Jewish Report. And I'm just going to confirm with Howie, because I know we changed the order. Are we going on to hold?
Yes, absolutely. We're going on to hold. Dina, the thoughts and prayers of so many people watching us this evening are with the people of Israel. There have been rockets fired, but still there are South Africans who have second homes there, who are looking to buy second homes, who are making aliyah, who are going to go live there despite what's happening, because ultimately it is our spiritual home and the home of the Jewish people. And we have a partnership with Hold. And if you are looking for a second home in Israel, we'd love you to speak to the people who will literally hold you by the hand and take you through the entire process of buying a home within the Holy Land. So Dina, we're going to run a quick poll for all those people who would love to speak to someone from Hold or get some more information about a second home in Israel, or maybe even a first home in Israel. We're going to stick up a poll right now. So if you would like some more information, if you're watching on Zoom, there's a poll in front of you at the moment. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, I'm sure we're putting something there as well, but not easy times there at the moment. I know I was watching a friend of mine on Instagram 7 times last night. He was woken up in Beersheba and had to go running into a bomb shelter.
Absolutely. And again, people say, like, even I know Rolene Marks, who's one of the correspondents from Israel, she says she's got 90 seconds to run to a bomb shelter, and 90 seconds sounds long enough. She said, but it's really not. And we've seen casualties. And I think no one really wants the war on both sides. There are civilians on both sides that are suffering at the moment. And it's a very, very tough situation. And we just all hope that there will be peace and that there will be some sort of solution.
And sooner, hopefully, rather than later. A lot of people are busy suffering at the moment. But the amazing thing is life goes on as normal. And I was busy watching my youngest niece playing in a park today in Jerusalem, and it becomes a way of life. So while we pray for everyone on that side of the world at the moment, our hearts and I think our minds are very much focused on what's happening there. And thank you for everyone who would like someone from Hull to contact them or be on the newsletter, and we'll make sure that we pass on that information to the guys from Hull. So Dina, what's next?
So next we have Nicqui Grant, who also is a registered dietitian in private practice, consults. Is it 3x4, Nicqui? What is it? Is it 3 times 4?
It's actually 3x4.
3x4.
3x4 genetics. Yes.
All right. So yes, so Nicqui's got a long history in genetics, dietetics, has studied, is continuing to study. I think we're actually so lucky to have you. And I know that your view is more of a holistic view as well. Were you entertained by Professor Noakes?
A lot of what Professor Noakes had to say, I have to 100% agree with. I think I'd like to just start out by reminding everybody what excess insulin actually does. So firstly, it promotes fat deposition. So whether you are insulin resistant or not, producing excess insulin is going to promote weight gain. It also inhibits fat oxidation, which means we can't access the fat stores for weight loss. So we don't actually want to have this excessively high insulin response. It promotes water retention. So get on the scale, and we know if we're holding on to a liter of water, it's a kilo up. And if you don't believe me, do the experiment and have a jug of water next to your scale and see how literally a liter of water will push that weight up. It increases our inflammatory markers, which predisposes us to so many diseases of lifestyle, including the cardiovascular diseases. It interferes with our hormones. And I think that that's really important. I'm seeing more and more in my practice fertility associated conditions or people struggling to fall pregnant. And it could purely be to do with the fact that their diet is promoting excessive insulin response. In women, it raises androgens. In men, it seems to drop the androgens. And it also suppresses immunity. So really, really important at this current time. So it's not only about the HbA1cs, it's also about the fact that insulin directly influences how our immune system responds. And lastly, it is the most potent appetite stimulant known to man. So we don't want an excessively high insulin response. But I also do want to just stress that there is no one size fits all. And when I do genetics, I am looking to see what is the person's response. Is their weight issue sitting in things like insulin resistance, gene predisposition? Is their weight sitting in obesity genes? And if it's not sitting in obesity genes, where is it sitting? So if I could just share my screen very quickly with you, I would like to just show you a one-page summary of what the 3x4 genetics report actually shows me. And what you can see here in the center, what we teach our patients and our practitioners, I know it's probably quite small. Sorry, Howard, I'll see if I can make it a little bit bigger.
Howard doesn't even wear glasses.
There we go. I'm just making a little bit bigger. Hopefully that helps. Okay.
Much better.
My glasses also on the desk for vanity's sake. So what we can see in this particular report, these energy pathways are speaking to me genetically about what's going on in this particular patient. So for example, this particular patient has genes that stimulate appetite, satiety or lack of satiety, which is satisfaction. So they don't get the message from the stomach to the brain to tell them they're full. And obviously that impacts on their intake. their energy expenditure, that speaks to me about their genetic capacity for metabolism. So for want of a better description, in layperson's terminology, it would be telling me, have they got a slow metabolism or a fast metabolism? Exercise response tells me how efficiently they access fat stores using exercise. So I've had patients with this kind of response. They don't access fat stores using exercise, but they're in the gym 7 days a week, 2 hours a day, twice a day, before work and after work. They're starving hungry because they're burning so many calories, but they're not accessing the fat stores efficiently. So weight loss is becoming really difficult. And because they're starving hungry, when they get home, they just put everything that they've just burnt into their mouths in terms of calories. Adipogenesis speaks to the genes that actually promote the fat that Professor Tim Noakes spoke about. You know, the overfilling of a fat cell, the making of new fat cells can be correlated to that particular pathway, and in pro-inflammatory fats. So when we look at this blueprint, we're actually looking for purple. Purple gives us an indication of there's a huge amount of genetic influence in that particular area in this individual. I've also got a sample here. Hopefully it will switch over for me. Did it switch over?
No.
Still seeing the same one.
Does this one say cardiovascular health?
Yes, it should say cardiovascular health. It did switch over. Okay. It was supposed to switch over to a second screen. Apologies. Let me just see if it's okay. Here is another example where you can see the only purple pathway is actually pro-inflammatory fat, which tells me this person genetically doesn't have fat genes or obesity genes, but in the presence of inflammation, they're not going to be able to lose weight. So we know that insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia or high presence of insulin does promote inflammation. And we can see this person has a blue pathway, which happens to be a medium. Purple is really highly impactful. Green is almost like the go. It's got some genetic variance in that pathway, but not significant. But what this particular report would be telling me is actually at a cellular level, it's probably detoxification, inflammation, and what Professor Noakes mentioned about folic acid or folate is a lot of people aren't able to process it because genetically they are unable to activate the enzymes that are necessary to convert folic acid or folate into a really technical biochemical name, L5-methyl tetrahydrofolate, which is the active version of our folic acid. And if you're not able to do this biochemically, then physiologically your functionality in weight management, disease management, cardiovascular disease health, et cetera, it goes on. So I use a lot of genetics in my practice because I very much believe that there is no one size fits all diet approach. Everybody is genetically made up slightly different. So where there's elements of the Banting that I 100% agree with, there are also elements that certain people, as Professor Noakes did mention, they're not going to do so well. Unfortunately, Professor, I did not do well on a Banting high-fat diet. I do a lot better on a Banting low-fat, higher protein. So again, I agree with his comment later on. So that for me is how I practice in my practice, have done so. Genetics I've been doing in my practice probably for about 17 years. Obviously not with this particular genetic report. For me, it's a game changer in practice for people to recognize that actually maybe it's detoxification, maybe you don't detoxify. And yes, our liver's role is to detoxify, but if you've got genetic variances in pathways that are responsible for detoxification, you're not going to be very efficient at it. And guess where toxins get stored if you can't detoxify them? In fat cells. And is your brain going to let them go? No. So if you've been one of those people that has weight cycled, where you kind of lose 10 kilos, gain 15, lose 15, gain 20, it's probably because your brain is trying to protect your body from this free-floating toxin and slowing down the metabolism and storing whatever you've just eaten so that we can trap that toxin back in the fat cell so it can't cause any destruction, reactive oxygen species, which predispose us to things like cancer and heart disease and all sorts of chronic diseases of lifestyle. So yeah, a little bit of a different take, agreement in some areas, disagreement in other areas, but I don't believe a one size fits all just because genetically we're very different.
Okay, and on a practical level, so obviously you've got to take a genetic test to find out all these different components and stuff like that. But what if you haven't taken it? So there's a question that's come in. So I just think let's try and just deal with this one. It says, nighttime binge eating is my biggest problem. I'm morbidly obese and have nearly 40 kgs to lose. I yo-yo dieted most of my life and feel that meals do not fill me. I've been on antidepressants for nearly 30 years. Any suggestions getting around this, just from a practical point of view in terms of, but they don't know what their genetics are. They don't know what their triggers are, what their weaknesses are. How do they start approaching it?
So Dina, I would assume that actually their genetics in their mood and behavior pathways are problematic, and some of those genes actually drive feeding behavior. And as a result, it's the way they comfort themselves. It's the way they cope with the stress. It's the way they cope with the environmental influences around them. So there's an element, obviously, of the psychology now. But again, looking at genetics would help us really get an insight. Is it because of genes sitting in your mood and behavior and you're now comfort eating? And also maybe toxins again. So they've struggled all their lives. They struggle with depression. This person struggled with depression, weight cycling. It sounds to me like there's also probably a lot going on in that methylation. So the folic acid that Professor Noakes and I both mentioned, it's not the only B vitamin that sits in that pathway. And unfortunately, everybody gives folate it's only about MTHFR. I want to pull my hair out when practitioners say you've got an MTHFR. Well, MTHFR is only one part of the pathway. It's only one part of the catalyst, and that influences our brain health. It influences our mood. Toxins influence our brain health, influence our mood. And that could be contributing to this person's inability to lose weight because they're using food as a comfort. They're using food to cope. Does that make sense? I hope that answered that question.
So someone's asking, what's the difference between folate and folic acid?
So folic acid is the synthetic version of that B vitamin. Folate normally comes from foods, but we still have to process them biochemically in our cells, and they get activated by enzymes. If you have genetic variances in your enzyme capacity, it just means that you have a reduced ability to do that. And then that impacts it. If you think about almost like accumulation, if you accumulate rubbish or waste product in your dustbin and you never ever throw it out, then eventually it gets to a point where it's so rotting and tipping point of disease, it causes disease. Similarly, with our folic acid and our folate, if we accumulate, so we get to a point where we can't cope with just that little bit, then we start to see the tip over of, as I mentioned, the mood and behavior, the coping mechanisms, DNA, so methylation is also involved in DNA repair, it's involved in cancer, it's involved in a lot. So difference between folic acid and folate: folic acid is synthetic, folate is what we get from our foods.
So, Nicqui, let me understand. I come to a DNA test and you say to me, you don't have a detoxification gene, or you've got the obesity gene. Are you saying to me, well, tough for you, bad luck, you're going to be fat the rest of your life, terribly sorry, we'll see you in 10 years' time? What can people practically do if you tell them, for example, they don't have sufficient detoxification?
So Howard, I'm actually really glad you asked that question, because oftentimes it is the case of, well, patients will go, oh, well, sorry for me, I've got the gene, I'm just going to live with that, or I'm not going to put the effort in. Now, this particular test that I use in my practice only tests genes that we can do something about. So they're not genes, they're not diagnostic genes. So they're not genes like BRCA. If you've got BRCA, you're going to get breast cancer. They're genes that are telling us where malfunction or lack of function or lack of efficient function is. Now, I teach my patients that if I know that that gene is missing, for example, because we can get a deletion gene, the deletion could be synonymous with a bridge. So we're going to drive a truck down a road across a ravine, and the ravine has a bridge, but this truck happens to be a rubbish truck because it's the detoxification road that we're driving. If I know that your bridge is missing, I'm going to want to divert that truck down a different way. And certain nutrients, certain supplements, certain behaviors can help us divert.
Give us some practical examples. Let's
Okay,
talk about.
so
Let's talk about
a practical diversion.
Yeah.
We need to eat dark green leafy vegetables every single day. The dark green leafy vegetables are the ones that upregulate and divert those trucks down other pathways or alternative routes, so that we are effectively using the genes that are working to our advantage to help us with detoxification. Okay. Supplementation, we could bypass the missing gene. So that's where supplementation.
What do we supplement with?
Vitamin supplements.
Which ones? I'm trying to be as look. We've got
specific,
we've got a huge audience
right.
tonight, and
Fantastic.
they want practical advice and
what
help.
What is my absolute favorite ingredient? And Hillet will attest to this. Is sulforaphane. Sulforaphane is the active ingredient that we get from broccoli, and you can buy it in a capsule that upregulates all your detoxification genes, as well as some methylation, anti-inflammatory genes. But we can do it with, as I said, the dark green leafy veg. That's a really good way to go. Don't have to go the supplement route. You do have to eat your broccoli raw, though, or all your cruciferous vegetables, which is broccoli, kale, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. They need to be raw, because that's how we get that sulforaphane activated in our bodies. Okay, without going into the bike.
Benefit.
If you cook them, they actually deactivate the enzyme that is necessary to activate one of the active ingredients in the vegetables. So we need to eat them as raw as possible. If you lightly steam them, you're not going to necessarily damage that enzyme. But enzymes are proteins, so enzymes can be damaged by heat. So we just got to keep that in mind. Yeah. And then the polyphenols, which is the deep dark pigments of our fruit and vegetables. So that is why berries are often seen to be the best source of fruit, is because number one, they're low in sugar, but number two, they are very rich in our polyphenolic compounds, which are things that switch on and off genes to our advantage. So those are the more colorful. I'm sure you've heard lots of dietitians in the past say, eat a rainbow, eat a rainbow. The more colorful the plate, the deeper, the darker the color of your vegetables, and obviously your fruit's limited because of the sugar content, but the more colorful, the better.
And tell us, is there anything that we can do to speed up our metabolism, either by taking a pill or by eating something specific?
There are certain foods. So, for example, chilies are known to also increase metabolism. Somebody asked about cinnamon. Cinnamon actually has been shown to sensitize us to insulin. So insulin sensitizing to help with the sugar regulation. Cinnamon is helpful. What else can we do from a actively increasing your metabolism? Cold water immersion. I have a colleague who swims in the ocean in Cape Town all year round. I think she's completely lost the plot, but it is really helpful from an anti-inflammatory point of view, but also from an increasing your metabolic activity point of view, as is exercise. But I think, again, remembering not to over-exercise. You know, often people don't realize that there is such a thing as excessive exercise. If you're genetically not natural at endurance exercise, doing some high intensity, short power exercise is good enough, or vice versa. So Exercise is a good way to do that. Intermittent fasting is great from an anti-inflammatory and a detox support. So there are lots of lifestyle things that we can be doing.
Yeah, and sorry, Nicqui, you mentioned we actually discussed just talking about exercise. A lot of people say, you know, eat what you can and then calories in, calories out from an exercise point of view. What's your view on that?
So that was what we were taught in our undergrad. If we wanted somebody to lose weight, we either had to push their calories up or we had to restrict their calories in. So calorie out as in more exercise or reduce their calorie in. And I can tell you categorically in the 25 years I've been in private practice, that's not true for everybody. So not everybody responds to exercise the same way. So that pathway that I showed you earlier, the very purple, all the purple in the energy, genetically, the person with the exercise response purple does not respond very well to exercise for accessing fat stores. So for them, it becomes more about let's focus on the diet, the quality of the diet, the frequency that you eat, the nutrient value of the diet, not just the calories. You know, every single thing that we put into our mouths gives our genes a message, and we want to give them the best message. We don't want to be giving them any junk message. I remember a newspaper headline probably about nearly 20 years ago, heading down William Nicol. It said, if you are what you eat, what are your children? And immediately what flashed into my head was junk, because they are all eating junk all the time. We are giving our genetics a message every single time we put something into our mouths. So we need to really be choosing wisely, knowing that our genes have such an influence on whether we burn fat, don't burn fat, respond to develop disease, don't develop disease. It does boil down to genetics. And yes, food is our medicine. The father of medicine said, let food be your medicine. And it's about time we start taking that seriously.
Fantastic. So thank you so much, Nicqui. Also, again, there are lots and lots of questions that are coming in, but we're going to try and take as many in a rapid fire at the end of our panel as we can, because we've also still got 2 more panelists that we want to get to. So thank you so much, and we will see you shortly at the end of this. Thank you. So Howie, we have one of our sponsors this evening that has been also on our show before is Skin Renewal. So we have an ad from them that we would like to play. So we've got Dr. Tarryn Christie with us this evening. So we are thrilled to have you. And without any further ado, we'll play your ad and then we'll come to you.
Skin Renewal's highly skilled medical aesthetic doctors create individual skincare plans just for you. Our experienced therapists assist with the latest technology to address dehydration, pigmentation, acne, and uneven skin tone. Enjoy the glow that follows.
Dina, let's get your microphone on.
Oh, that helps, hey, especially if you're trying to host.
A little.
So, Christy, Tarryn, you are clearly glowing.
Thank you.
Whatever you're doing is working. Howie also wants to glow, but Howie, you look like you're glowing, so it's wonderful.
Thank you. Well, I hope Tarryn's going to explain to me how I grow and if she can cryogenically freeze all my fat cells.
Okay.
So you are actually a medical doctor, but you focus on the skin. You've got a holistic view on the body. You don't just look at sort of singular factors. You look at the health. There's skin renewal, there's health renewal. Give us a view on what you do.
Yeah, so I work at the Renewal Institute. So a really nice aspect of that is we do look holistically at different aspects of people's, skin, health, brain, sleep, all those important things that come into play when we are dealing with our diet. And, the topic of tonight is diet and, how we can maintain a healthy lifestyle. And I think it's such a privilege to be able to talk you know, on a panel tonight with people who are so dedicated to the field and have such experience and knowledge on it. But I think one of the key take-home things is we all talking the same language. We all saying pretty similar things, which is really nice and interesting, because even though we come from such diverse backgrounds, we are all talking the same language. And I think the most important thing is that not one plan is going to work for each individual. We are individual beings. We have different needs. We have different things that work for us. And ultimately, to acknowledge that, or be cognizant of the fact that we all have individual, you know, genetics and lifestyles and desires and strengths and weaknesses, and to work on our diet and lifestyle according to that. So I am going to share a little slideshow now with you. Just let me know if it works.
Perfect. There we go.
Got it. Okay. So first of all, one of the things I always like to begin with when it comes to diet is to ban the controversial quote by Kate Moss, which I know she has retracted, which says nothing tastes as good as skinny feels, because it should actually be nothing tastes as good as healthy feels. And I think there's a big discrepancy between being skinny and being healthy. So that's where I'd like to begin with. When it comes to obesity or increased weight or not your optimal weight, I think the thought of it being, you know, intake versus output is quite antiquated, and that's how it was in the past. We are obese because we eat too much and we don't exercise enough. But when you actually look at the research and you look at the science, you realize that it is a lot more than that. So this is a nice systematic diagram showing actually all the different things that come into play. So whether it's what promotes your hunger, your gut hormones, which I'll be talking about a little bit, your genetic predisposition, which we've spoken a bit about now, low-grade inflammation, very importantly, gut microbiomes, which I'll also be talking about, impaired metabolism, which all leads to a state of obesity or central adiposity, which we then know leads to insulin resistance. So at the Renewal Institute, we like to focus when we talk mainly about health, and that varies from skin. But in health, we talk about our 4 pillars. We believe that you cannot achieve or be successful on a diet without looking at these 4 pillars. But very importantly, and most importantly, is the foundation of these pillars is sleep. And that's something that we all need to address. So our pillars look at gut health, it looks at exercise, it looks at nutrition, and it also looks at stress management. Sleep is one of those things that we all say we're not getting enough of, and I don't know many people who do get enough of it. In our busy days, you know, whether you're a mom or whether you are a healthcare worker, you know, working crazy hours, or it's one of those things that we take for granted, and it requires a lot of input. So good sleep hygiene, you know, staying away from coffee, all those sort of things. But once you start looking at the research, and I'm not going to go into all the details because I do believe that's where Google articles comes into, you will start to realize what a pivotal role sleep plays. And that is why it is on our foundation. So just to look a little bit at sleep, and this is why I'm just giving a brief overview. If we just look at the hormonal components on how bad sleep or lack of sleep or sleep deprivation over a prolonged period of time, it has an effect on a lot of hormones that are directly related to then increased weight gain and insulin resistance. So one of them being cortisol levels increase, that's your stress hormone, which then really relates to increased appetite. Then you get an increase of your ghrelin levels. This is a hormone that is secreted when you are hungry. So you have hormones that balance whether you're hungry and when you full. So this hormone gets secreted, goes to your brain, and it tells you, I'm hungry, you need to eat. So that hormone actually increases. And then very importantly, leptin, another hormone which is appetite controlling, decreases. So leptin is a hormone that basically goes to your brain, tells you I'm full. It's a satiety hormone, and it suppresses your hunger. But if you're not sleeping adequately, this is then decreased. Insulin secretion is decreased, so your glucose levels rise, and this leads to insulin resistance. And then lastly, thyroid levels also decrease, which we know then leads to a reduced metabolic rate. Other things we have to look at, there are different types of sleep disturbances. Obstructive sleep apnea is another whole topic that we could spend a whole evening discussing. It's fragmented sleep, and it also leads to hypoxia, which leads to a whole, hypoxia is basically decreased oxygen. So often, you know, the wives will say, my husband's gasping for breath in the middle of the night. That can be an indication towards obstructive sleep apnea. Or it could just be you having shortened duration of sleep, or your circadian rhythm, which is your day-night rhythm, is misaligned. So night shift workers, those sort of things. This just looks at a little bit more, sorry, of a scientific point of view. And again, it's going back to what we've discussed earlier. So we've got increased sympathetic activation. So this is increase of your stress hormones. Then you've got changes in what you call your hypertrophy-pituitary adrenal axis, which is your brain axis. You get increased cortisol, which is again increased stress hormone. Oxidative stress, we know that any oxidative stress that gets increased will then cascade down to insulin resistance. Inflammatory pathways get increased, and then changes in those hormones that I said help to control your appetite. All of this goes back to what we've all been speaking about, which is insulin resistance. Your pancreas, B cells start to dysfunction, you get glucose intolerance and type 2 diabetes. This is just another way of looking at sleep. And I do tend to focus quite a lot about sleep because it is one of the things that has such an effect on our body. Another thing you've got to look at is studies have been showing that with lack of sleep, you are then more prone to eating high calorie diets, more sugary foods. They've actually done studies that show that. So you get increased calorie intake. A change in those hormones causes increased hunger, your leptin and your ghrelin. You are more tired, so you're less able to exercise. You're awake for longer. So we all know what a midnight snack is about. And when we start raiding the fridge at midnight, our bodies are telling us they're hungry. And then obviously your sleep quality and sleep duration. And this all leads towards obesity. The next pillar that we talk about is gut health. Professor Tim Noakes spoke, how to ask a little bit about gut health and the importance of it. And it is one of those things that is definitely catching researchers' eyes, and they're starting to realize the direct link between gut and brain and health, and the effect that a good, gut health has. So the Human Microbiome Project says that the human body has 100 trillion microscopic life forms living in it. Essentially, in our gut, there are 100 trillion bacteria, viruses, protozoa that are all living and are meant to be living in a homeostatic state. So we're meant to have good bacteria and we're meant to have bad bacteria. However, this no longer occurs. It has to do with genetics, has to do with diet, has to do with whether we have any chronic illnesses, even antibiotics. So this is a very scientific page. I won't go through it all in detail, but it's basically there just to show everyone how integrated that gut microbacteria is into leading into this accumulation of fat. In the corner there, you'll see increased inflammation, dysregulation of glucose, and insulin resistance. So when your gut is not balanced, or you have an overgrowth of bad bacteria, this whole cascading pathway can occur. This is another slide just to show how your gut health can lead to obesity. And now again, it's broken up into different parts of the body. So your liver, you're going to get increased release of glucose. So more fat being broken down, glucose, and then fat storage. You're going to get increased inflammation. In the small bowel, you get release of something called SCFA, which is short chain fatty acids, which also then lead to insulin resistance. You get decreased gastric emptying. So this is trying to show you that it's a pathway that works both ways. If you've got good gut health, then you will have better gastric emptying. Bad gut health, bad gastric emptying. People complain they're bloated, they're uncomfortable, they're constipated. Then they go to the pharmacy and they take laxatives, which further destroys the gut health. So this just shows how we need that homeostatic relationship between the gut microbiome in order to prevent and try and treat obesity or increased weight. And then just another thing that Professor Tim Noakes spoke about is this very important relationship that we have with our gut and brain. Dysbiosis at the bottom, you'll see, is an imbalance between your good and your bad bacteria. And as you can see, it leads to changes in the brain, stress, mood, behavioral, all different changes that can occur. So balancing our gut is very important. We use a lot of supplements that I'll talk about a little bit later when I discuss our diet in more detail, but we strongly advocate for probiotics. I'll go through them actually now. We talk about we call it the 5 R's of gut restoration that we like to start clients on when we are starting them on the diet. They don't take all of these, but if we find that we are having gut issues, we like to focus on the 5 R's. So the first R is removing bad foods. We know those. We call them our GADs, our gluten, grains, alcohol, dairy, sugar. Carbohydrates are obviously included as your gluten. We want to remove bad bacteria. We will all have some bad bacteria. So there we use natural detoxification, oregano oils. We call some antimicrobial caps. We remove bad, we replace our acids, because acids in the stomach are actually good. They keep our bacteria at bay, and remove constipation naturally with magnesium and those sort of things. We then want to replace the good bacteria, and that's when we use probiotics. We want to repair the gut lining, because often if we have a poor diet, we get what's called leaky gut syndrome, where those little tight junctions, you won't be able to see me, but little tight junctions that are sitting meant to be close and not allow any bad, polysaccharides or anything like that through. If your gut lining is destroyed or has any leaky holes in it, or your bad bacteria and things are going to go through. So we use things such as glutamine, Mariva to repair that. And then I've spoken about replacing stomach acid, replacing zinc. Zinc is very, very important in healing your gut lining, any digestive enzymes that need replacing. And then the last one is just to rebalance and retain that health. And that forms part of the other pillars that we go on to. Okay, one of the things I like to talk about when I talk about gut health, it is detoxification, because it also forms part of restoring our gut health. And one of the things I always say to people is detoxification is so important. When we are dieting, we are shedding fat cells, and in our fat cells, that's where all our toxins are stored. So our fat cells store estrogen, they store any heavy metals, they store any toxins that we've picked up in our diet from pesticides. And when we start to lose fat cells, we get a high concentration of toxins within our body. Our body's natural response is then to protect us. And by doing that, it's then to make further fat cells so we can then store all those toxins. So detoxification, or what they call cellular cleansing, is really important because we want to try and remove those toxins first before we start to shed the weight. And that forms part of our diet plan as well. Okay, our next...
I didn't catch that. Could you try again?
Sorry. Our next pillar of health...
Can you hear me? From a practical perspective, how do you detox?
So what we do is eliminate unhealthy foods. So it's your carbohydrates, it's alcohol, sugar, dairy, and we basically then use your proteins, we use your leafy vegetables. We don't do a calorie restriction on our first 5-day diet. So we allow you to eat, you don't have to weigh your food portions or whatever. And then we use supplementation. So whether it's oregano oil, MSM, and vitamin C, which helps for detoxification. So yeah, they're different supplements that we then use in order to try and detox, and then obviously replace good gut bacteria, probiotics, and things like that. Water intake, hugely important to flush the toxins that you are removing in order to prepare for the diet. Okay, so our next pillar of health is exercise. I'm not going to go into detail about this. There are multiple studies. We all know the benefits of exercise. I think this picture just is a nice summary of the different effects that it does help with. One of the interesting things is that we've spoken about and that we're all on agreement on is that insulin resistance is the key to obesity. And if we can really target that, then it's a step towards the right direction. And in this diagram, you will just see insulin clearance, insulin being brought up a lot, and how exercise helps to make your pancreas work better, helps for glucose uptake, increased fat oxidation, increased glucose uptake, increased insulin sensitivity. So yeah, exercise is very important. Interestingly, I've looked at a few articles where they looked at whether exercise alone can help with obesity, or whether you need a calorie restricted diet, or whether you need a combination of both. And I think it's a field where there's a lot more research that still needs to be done, because people who do suffer with increased weight do struggle to move. So it's, this negative cycle of how can you get someone who is carrying more weight to start exercising, and finding the right exercise. And is it cardio versus resistant training? But one of the things that is very clear in research is that they are saying exercise 100% has a role in maintaining weight loss once you have achieved your goal. So they've definitely found that across the board, exercise, obviously we know the benefits, but really, really helps in order to maintain weight loss. And that's where we see a lot of people coming in who say, oh, I did this diet, it was great, but I couldn't maintain it. And, you find out that exercise has been lacking from their diet. Okay, so the next part of our pillar in terms of achieving optimal health and diet is stress management. I think especially during COVID, this is something that we are all suffering with. I don't know one person who can happily say in the last year they have had no stress. Everyone has underlying stress. We are seeing it with what we're calling maskne or acne. We're seeing it on the skin. The skin's a dashboard to what's happening on your body, and we're seeing it, and a lot of it is relating to stress. We all know that we put on weight during lockdown. I think it was either due to not exercising, but also the stress of it. And I love this quote because it says, if stress burned calories, I'd fear I'd disappear. So stress mainly is one of our responses to an emergency. So it's our fight and flight. Normally what happens is, you're in a stressful situation, you get this massive surge of cortisol, and then cortisol goes through these different processes and different organs in order to try and give us energy to protect ourselves. So the liver makes more glucose so that we've got more energy. Fatty tissue is broken down quickly to also release energy, sometimes even muscle is broken down. The problem is when that stress becomes chronic and long-term, okay? So cortisol gets secreted and secreted and secreted, and eventually it now has a negative effect. So here you get hyperglycemia, very importantly, you get insulin resistance, and this obviously doesn't help the process. So yeah, stress management is something that people don't often talk about it, but it's a pillar that we do need to look at. Lastly, I talk about the actual diet and the food part. So we can see that there's so many aspects that play a role when we're looking at obesity and insulin resistance. And the diet part is not actually looking at what we're eating. And it's quite nice to see that we're all on a similar page here, where we know that the carbohydrates make our blood sugar rise, release more insulin, makes you more hungry, and you're in this vicious cycle of insulin resistance. So our diet has a 5-prong approach. There are different things that we look at. It is a calorie controlled diet, and it has a supplemented whey protein meal shake that doesn't have any fillers or artificial colorants or artificial sweeteners. That's all been removed from the shake. So it really is a healthy shake. You then have a specialized eating program, that's calorie, low glycemic and low inflammatory foods. There are only certain foods that are allowed, certain, you're not allowed your bananas and those sort of things. There's no snacking allowed. So snacking has been shown every time you eat something, you release insulin. And we found that with having 3 meals a day instead of snacking, it really does decrease that insulin surge. And then very importantly, we also bring into it intermittent fasting. So we try and encourage a 12-hour fast. Sometimes it's to 14 hours. Most people don't struggle with it. They, eat last meal around 7:30. Obviously, if you're a mom or a parent, it's a little bit tricky, but then breakfast is normally around 9. So it's not as long as the 16-hour fast, but it is, most people can tolerate it. Very importantly, we always include supplements in our diet. So they aid for detoxification. You will continue the detox supplements throughout the diet. We then supplement with things to improve gut health and aid digestion. You are medically supervised by either a doctor or a nurse throughout the whole period. And we have 2-week follow-ups. Accountability is very important. We want to know what's happening, on your body stat, which I'll talk a little bit about now. And then there's an ongoing maintenance program. So the first thing normally is we begin with a consultation. You have to have a medical consultation with the doctor. That's where we look at, we take a medical history. Do you have any medical problems? Are there any contraindications to the diet? Are there any medications that you're on that can hamper your weight loss? We have a very in-depth questionnaire. Everyone gets very irritated because it's pages and pages, where we ask questions that prelude to maybe you have an underlying medical condition, but it hasn't been diagnosed. So for hormones, which are such an important role, we'll ask about mood swings or, sweating or those sort of things, thyroid questions, hair loss, fatigue, but that haven't been diagnosed. So they're little red flags for us to look out to see if there are any triggers or that we should be worried about. And if necessary, we then always do blood work. So it's a nice baseline to be able to see where someone is starting the diet off. And you will be amazed at the amount of people we pick up with before even starting the diet who have insulin resistance that they were completely unaware of. So we do an HbA1c, and from there we can see that they are, insulin resistant, and that they might struggle initially on, they tend to take a little bit longer to lose the weight, and, we can guide them through that. Clients then see a nurse who goes through an in-depth discussion about how our program works and what the diet involves and how to weigh your food, and all of that. And included in that is a body stat analysis. People might say, what is a body stat analysis? basically it gives us an indication of the different components within your body, so that when you get on the scale, you're not just looking at a weight. A weight is very different to actually what is going on. It includes your water, it includes your minerals, which are your bones, it includes your protein, which is your muscle, and then it also includes your fat. So when you get on the scale, it is not just showing you fat. And it's very important that we discuss this with our clients, because sometimes people get despondent. I'm not losing weight. I'm not losing weight. But you actually realize that maybe their exercise is increased and they're looking lean and mean, but the scale is not showing anything. So it's really then nice to also show a comparison in a graph form, looking how the weight might not have moved, but the total body fat percentage has decreased and the muscle mass has increased. The next part is starting on our detox, which I've explained a little bit thanks to the question, where it's not calorie restricted, but it focuses on good proteins, good fats, good healthy vegetables, and eliminating the carbohydrates, alcohol, sugar, dairy, those sort of things. We then start a fat loss diet, where we work 2 months and then we take a month off. And then once someone has achieved their goal, we go on to maintenance. So these are just some of the supplements. This is what you get on your initial program, your first 2 weeks. There are lots of supplements that are available, but it is your whey protein shake, your MSM and vitamin C, which helps for inflammation and detoxification, oregano oil caps, and your probiotic for your gut health. This is just a long list of the wonderful supplements we have. One of the nice things about our supplements, and our patients and even friends and family are testimony to it, they're always sending me a message saying, please, if you can get our vitamin D or our zinc or this and that. Our supplements are amazing and they are affordable. They are sourced, the amount of information that has gone into sourcing them and where they get it from and down to what the capsules are made of. But yeah, really, really good supplements. So there's a whole lot of other supplements we offer for weight loss. So magnesium oxide, which is your colon active, helps for constipation. Leptin formulation is really nice. It helps to increase leptin in your brain. So it helps to tell you you're nice and full. Then, and very interesting, and one we've spoken about earlier, well, a name wasn't mentioned, but the broccoli sprout, the sulfur-fluoride. So that is hugely popular, especially I find in women who need estrogen detoxification or showing signs of estrogen retention, and also people who we know have got higher blood sugars. It's not contraindicated in any, insulin resistant patient, and really helps with that. And
Tarryn, I'm so sorry, but I'm afraid we've run way over time.
That's it. I just wanted to show quickly our before and after. So it just shows, I always say the proof is in the pudding. We're not allowed the pudding, but there are some of our successful clients. So yeah, done.
So in fact, Tarryn, what we're going to do, we're going to re-show your ad. We're going to run a poll for people who want to contact you. Let's stop sharing your screen now. And Perfect. Not only that, for people who join our patron campaign this evening, you've been kind enough to give us 2 vouchers worth 2,500 Rand each, which we will do in a draw and announce on Thursday evening of 2 people who will be able to win from your clinic vouchers for 2,500 Rand each. So let's quickly watch your advert. We'll run a poll for people who want more information from you, and you'll be able to send them your presentation and provide them with as much information as they need. And then we're going to go straight after that into our Juice Report patron campaign, where we're going to, for people who join this evening, give away 2 vouchers worth 2,500 Rand each.
Skin Renewal's highly skilled medical aesthetic doctors create individual skincare plans just for you. Our experienced therapists assist with the latest technology to address dehydration, pigmentation, acne, and uneven skin tone. Enjoy the glow that follows.
So if you would like some more information from Tarryn and the Renewal Clinic, we're going to put up a poll quickly click yes, we'll get you a copy of the presentation, and we'll get you much more information from Skin Renewal Clinic and from their loyalty program as well. So you should be seeing on your Zoom screen now a poll. Please feel free to answer that, as well as we'll put something up on YouTube and Facebook as well to allow you to answer that. And you can get some more information about the programs run by the Skin Renewal organization. Dina, hard to believe that there's so much science behind what really just was eat less, exercise more, and you'll be healthy.
Listen, absolutely. I think what's actually happened over the years, and as we saw again with the beginning with Tim Noakes, as he said, he's been through this journey about what was scientifically correct and then what has changed and what has sort of evolved. I think that, and we also see that the themes that are coming up with all of our panelists are the same. So they're all saying that there's no one fits all solution. They're saying that insulin resistance is a huge problem, and they're saying vitamins and supplements are absolutely essential. So I know that there have been a lot of questions about which vitamins, which supplements. So we are going to get our panelists again to give us their absolute must-haves on vitamins, on supplements, on stuff that you actually need. I think a lot of people over COVID have started taking zinc, have started taking vitamin D3 that they weren't taking before. And we're hearing from all of our
thiamine, vitamin C.
Absolutely, that weren't taken before, and now everyone is taking them religiously because of inflammation, because of protection against COVID, and sort of to help boost the immune system. So it's actually very interesting that they all do actually converge and align. So yes, and we've got one more panelist.
We've got one more panelist, but before we speak to our panelists, let's run our advert for our patron campaign. And remember, if you sign up tonight, 2 people who sign up this evening will win 2,500 Rand vouchers to go to the Skin Renewal Clinic.
But Howard, I have been remiss. We actually have another sponsor this evening.
We do, but before we talk about any more sponsors, we're going to, in fact, run a poll now. We've brought you now 94 webinars during lockdown. We produce the Juice Report for you every single week. It's read by about 58,000 people, the Juice Report, either online or in hard copy. And we do this for free. We deliver it to people's homes, to their townhouses, to their apartment buildings. It's an absolute amazing thing. We have the best editor in the country in Peter Cross-Maunda, and we provide real information for our community, about what we're doing, and we'd love you to be part of the family. And that's why we're running this patron campaign for a mere 180 Rand a month. You can sign up as a patron of the South African Juice Report. So answer the poll that's in front of you at the moment, and we will make sure that we give out 2 vouchers this evening. And I'm so happy. I don't know if you noticed, I'm wearing a feeler top today. And in the middle of our broadcast, in fact, Lawrence Slotsky messaged me and said, we're going to, on your next webinar, give away to anyone who joins the campaign then, or is already a member of the patron campaign, we are going to give away 10 feeler sweatshirts on Thursday night at our next webinar to members of the patrons of the South African Juice Report. So we're enormously excited about that. So thank you if you signed up for our patron campaign this evening. But yes, Dina, we have one more sponsor, and this keeps on coming up, and it came up in the questions. I keep on hearing more and more people drinking collagen shakes. Have you ever tried one?
So I do actually sometimes add collagen. I haven't had it for a while, but a lot of people add collagen to their drinks and stuff. Doesn't actually have a taste or anything, but collagen in itself has been shown, obviously, to be an essential component of eternal youth.
And looking at your skin, no one would ever believe that you were 75.
No one. 76 next week.
So Danny, tell us more about some collagen, please. So Collagene, it is the only kosher collagen in South Africa, which we know is really, really important. Danny, I'm sure we've got a poll as well, because I'm sure people will want some more information about Collagene. So if you'd like a brochure, or if you would like to order, on your screen at the moment, tell me, Dina, what does collagen actually taste like?
So there is no taste to collagen, which is, unless you've got a flavored collagen. But I'm the one, I think that Collagene sells, well, first of all, it's parav, it's kosher, it's halal. You can add it to pretty much anything. So if you're just getting your collagen boost, and you said it's for joints, it's for bones, it's for skin, elasticity, all of those wonderful things. So it really does have a lot of benefits. And you don't have
I know for skin, people, I mean, particularly for skin, people use it, and it brings back elasticity to skin. I haven't tried it yet, but maybe in fact Collagene will be kind and give me one to taste.
Your genie in a bottle.
And then you'll see next time how young and youthful I look.
And your hair will grow, and your joints will be strong, and you'll be marvelous. And you'll really wear your feeler in strength.
Looking strong and buff. So there are about 66 people who want to be added, and that's just on Zoom, who want to be added and get a brochure from Collagene. So thank you for Collagene for sponsoring tonight. And Danny, are we allowed to tell people that it's actually your wife? Danny, turn on your camera.
Hello, Howard. Yes, that's fine. There's no nepotism involved. That is my wife.
But your wife understands the power of advertising with the South African Jewish Report.
Totally. She actually advertised 2 weeks ago. We were walking back from shul, and she got accosted. Very nice example of advertising in the Jewish Report. Someone came to across the road and goes, "Are you the collagen lady? I saw your adverts in the Jewish Report newspaper." So if you guys are ever thinking of promoting your business, do it at the Jewish Report, because it is a fantastic platform to advertise in.
And look how young Danny looks, but that's because he is.
Cool, Danny, thank you. So Dina, Hillet Milner has been mocking my diets for years. When I started following Tim Noakes, he lit over Yontif dinners, over Shabbos, would look at me as if I was completely insane. Hillet, have you changed your mind?
I have changed my mind, but you see, it depends to which aspect. So with no disrespect to Professor
see, Tim's paying attention.
Yeah, here we go. Dietitian, Professor Noakes debate. But I feel that there isn't much of a debate at the end of the day, because I do think we all, well, not maybe all of us, but I speak for myself as a dietitian, are definitely on the same page in terms of, the underlying problem of insulin resistance, and how excess carbohydrate intake spikes up insulin levels, increases inflammatory processes in the body, can cause a lot of diseases, 100%. So in terms of the carbohydrate and sugar aspect, I'm 100% on the same page. In terms of how fat intake and maybe the types of fats, maybe there's a bit of discussion to be had there. But for me, it's also about taking, I think, what everyone's spoken about it already. So I'm actually quite happy that I'm at the end, to combine it as to how to say, how can we look at a holistic project? Because yes, Howard, you've been on Professor Tim Noakes' diet for a while, and I was maybe at your throat for it. But the question for me is, when I see patients coming to me, is sustainability, and how to look at someone in a holistic manner as well. Not to say that that's not what Professor Noakes does at all, but for me, it's also about moderation. And I find that people or a lot of my patients, when they go to one extreme for a long time, it's very hard for them to sustain it. And then when they suddenly go off that diet, then the weight spikes up and increases as well. So, but I am in agreement with most of what Professor Noakes has to say. So I don't think,
we encourage debate. We love it. It's what we thrive.
Yeah, no, but I'm not saying that to please everyone. I would say I had a different opinion. I do believe that cutting out a particular food group completely from the diet might have a little bit of risks in terms of deficiencies in some nutrients that they might be lacking there, and also in terms of the palatability of the diet and keeping to it in a sustained way. But I think, once again, in everything in moderation, and we've said it a million times, there is definitely not one size fits all when it comes to eating. So someone really would benefit from a ketogenic diet that is high in fat, or someone might benefit from a very low carb diet that's higher in proteins. And most of the time, and I can say when we were trained as clinicians, we were giving diets that were 50-60% carbohydrates, and that was like insane. It's like 12 slices of bread. I mean, I would never do that now, never. So research definitely does change, and the way, you know, we were taught long ago is definitely outdated. And I think everyone needs to sort of, you know, we need to open our eyes to new research and to new ideas, and to not be, I suppose, demeaning to one school of thought if the research is there as well. You also need to be open-minded. It's the same thing with genetics and nutrigenomics. It's a new and up-and-coming field, and I think it's very, very important to welcome these new fields and new research when we're looking at health and holistic health, because, you know, it's science. Science is changing all the time, so you have to be up to date with science.
So Hilit, can I ask a question? There have been so many questions coming in about Mediterranean diets. So what is a Mediterranean diet, and when would you recommend it to someone? What sort of person would thrive best on a Mediterranean diet?
So Mediterranean diets are generally looking at higher fat diets. You're looking at also the more monounsaturated fats. So you're looking at things like your olive oils and your olives, avocados, your nuts, your seeds. When you are looking at grains, or people in the Mediterranean, they do still eat grains, might be lower in carbohydrates, but your whole grain products, so like your bulgur wheat, your barley, your buckwheat, lots of raw foods, so fruit and vegetables. And most of the time, if you think of people living in the Mediterranean, it's fresh raw produce. So whether it's fish from the ocean, or if you're looking at Greece, for example, I did a culinary dietetics tour of Greece. People who live in the mountains in Greece are not eating fish. It's what's basically sourced and farmed in that particular region. But when you're specifically looking at a Mediterranean diet, it's mostly higher fat, but you're looking at monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. So your seeds and your nuts and your olives and your olive oil, not your animal-based fats specifically. It's difficult to say, you know, this type of person will benefit from a Mediterranean diet and this one won't. Once again, we're looking at, personally, you're looking at genetics, the same thing that Nicqui looked at. Often you can see from someone's genetic profile whether they would benefit a Mediterranean diet over a different diet. You can see certain genes that have variations in them that don't allow you to maybe break down certain fats, like saturated fats. So their genetic profile might not benefit having a lot of cream or butter or coconut oil. So I think it's very individualized. It's very hard to say, well, you know, Dina, you better on a Mediterranean diet, and how are you not? You need to look at patient's history, you need to look at the medical history, you need to look at the medication that they're on, the gut health, their genetic profile, the emotional relationship with food, all of these things. You know, I can't really just pinpoint and say, okay, well, you'll be better on a ketogenic diet, you'll be better on a Mediterranean diet.
And I have to ask you, what is nutrigenics and nutrigenomics, and how is it considered to be personalized preventative nutrition? Because we hear all these terms, but what do they actually mean, and how do they differentiate?
So nutrigenetics is when you have done your genetic test, like Nicqui showed you an example of one of the tests that we use, when you're testing someone's genetic profile, and by understanding your genes, you understand the way in which you break down certain nutrients or utilize certain nutrients in your body, and how this can result in a risk for certain chronic disease development, weight gain, weight loss, your exercise response. So it's actually nutrigenetics is looking at your genes and how that affects the way you break down certain nutrients and utilize them in your body, and how that is then going to manifest or could manifest into chronic diseases, weight regulatory problems, and things like that. Nutrigenomics is how the nutrients that you're eating, so the food on the plate, actually has a conversation with your genes. So we know that certain foods that you eat can switch on certain genes in your body and switch off certain genes. So saying like my genes are my genes and there's nothing I can do about them isn't really true, because you might not be able to change the coding of your gene, but you can certainly change the behavior of the genes. You can activate certain genes and deactivate certain genes by eating certain foods. So for example, eating oily fish that is high in omega-3 fatty acids switches off inflammatory genes in the body, so it reduces inflammation. Or we've mentioned numerous times before, your dark green leafy vegetables, when you eat them raw, the bioactive compound sulforaphane switches on your detoxification genes, helps you to break down toxins in the body, balance sex hormones like estrogen and things like that. So that's nutrigenomics.
Okay, so if you had to say, so like all of our, obviously the people watching today want like practical advice. They want to know what supplements should they be taking, what food should they be eating, what would you say like that is good for everyone? So never mind the genes, there are certain things that are good for everyone pretty much. What should they be taking?
Sure. So I think from a food perspective, we definitely need to be looking at fiber and probiotics that we can also get naturally from food through yogurt, because gut health really is first and foremost when it comes to our health and well-being. If our gut's not healthy, the rest of our body's not healthy. And that's also from a weight perspective and weight regulatory perspective. If we're looking at, if I can always say, I call them like diamonds in the rough. So our raw green leafy vegetables and our cruciferous vegetables, so cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, those are really key to upping the detoxification and antioxidant effects in the body as well. Obviously, some people can't tolerate them because they are gas-forming foods often. So that's something to also consider. You know, that's where their individualization comes in. If we're looking at antioxidant foods, so these are all things that work on a cellular level, we're looking at a lot of your vegetables. So what I could say to everyone in general is, how many vegetables are you eating a day? We are definitely under eating vegetables. You know, we should be eating about 4 to 5 cups of vegetables per day. And I can guarantee you most people aren't doing that. So a lot of people are turning to supplements, but they could really be getting a lot of nutrients from food. You know, vitamin C was out of stock when COVID hit us all. But is vitamin C really helping us with our immune system? And that's a completely, you know, different debate. Are we getting enough vitamin C from our food? We are. And are there other foods that can be actually switching on our antioxidant genes in a more potent way than vitamin C? So I think we're spending a lot of money on supplements, and possibly the incorrect supplements and the incorrect form of supplements, because what we can see now, if we're just taking, let's say, a supplement to supplement folic acid in the body, if we're not taking the correct form because we've got a change in a gene that utilizes that folic acid, then we've got a problem. Then we actually not, you know, you're sort of feeding like a traffic circle and there's traffic all the way around, but you keep on feeding it from the one side and the cars aren't going anywhere. So you really need to know which vitamins you should be taking and what you're not wasting your money on, and how can you actually get the food onto your plate in an optimal way before you run to go get your supplements. And I do think there is a place for supplements, 100%, but it's which ones and which ones are good for you. I know that's not really answering your question, because you're asking me to tell everyone to just blankly take, you know, B vitamins. It also depends on the patient profile. You know, if you're looking at diabetes or polycystic ovarian syndrome, there are certain supplements that are, you know, well, if you've got polycystic ovarian syndrome, you should be looking at your vitamin D, your B12, your omega-3, things that magnesium, things that really need to be there. But I think it's very patient dependent.
Yeah, and then how also, like, there's obviously a gap between the dietary info that we get and how to implement it. How do we bridge that gap?
So I think the first thing is to understand the individual, because you can give a lot of information, but how one practically implements it into their home is a completely different strategy or story. You need to understand what's going on in someone's life. Like I said, it's also about, you know, what people grew up with, the emotional relationship with food. You can give someone a meal plan, but if that doesn't work well with them and they don't have a good relationship with food, or their day is so busy because they're so busy working and you're telling them to prepare all these fancy meals and that's not practical, then that's a bit of an issue as well. And I think also understanding, for me, the important thing is to understand which foods do certain things in your body. So not just to look at, calories in versus calories out, which, many people often do, or to say, well, I'm restricting carbohydrates, that's a carb, I can't have that. Or I'm not having a lot of fats, that's a particular fat, I can't have that. But saying, for example, I'm giving you like capers is a very potent antioxidant. So suddenly when you know that your oily fish is an anti-inflammatory, and maybe your fennel or your capers or your radishes are strong antioxidants, and so on and so forth, your plate starts looking more colorful, literally, but also in terms of meaning to your body, the messages that it's giving to your body at the end of the day. So people need to also understand how to prepare their food in order to optimize the nutritional potential of that food, like cooking tomatoes to actually access the lycopene, which is a very good antioxidant and good to prevent prostate cancer. If you're not cooking the tomatoes, you're not really accessing the lycopene. So it's from understanding the patient and understanding the food and how to actually put it on our plate at the end of the day, which is...
So cooking tomatoes is a good thing.
Yes, definitely.
But not Brussels sprouts or broccoli.
Yeah, well, yeah. You can chop it. You can chop the cabbage and chop the broccoli and chop the Brussels sprouts to actually activate that sulforaphane and leave it for 60 to 90 minutes so that the work has sort of been done already by the enzyme, and then lightly cook it, because it's very difficult to eat Brussels sprouts and broccoli and cauliflower raw, especially for the stomach. So that's actually something that everyone can do.
Gillian, can we ask you some of the questions that have come in from members of the audience? One person says, how do I know my genetic profile? How does one go about doing that?
So there's many practitioners who are doing genetic testing, Nicqui being one of them, myself being one of them as well. It's just a simple mouth swab. It's a simple mouth swab. It's not a blood test. You do a mouth swab, it gets sent off to a lab, and then about 2 to 3 weeks later, you get a full, you get a full booklet of your genetic results. You don't personally get it. You get it with the practitioners that they can go over it with you. As Nicqui said, all the genes that we test for are not diagnostic genes. So it's not a scary test. Often people are like, I don't want to do my genetic test because I'm going to find out that I'm going to get cancer. It's really not like that. One gene does not equal a disease. And it's empowering. Knowledge is power, because all of these genes is something that you can do something about. You can change your behavior. You can change your diet. You can change your environment. So
now practically, do you go for a test and then go to the dietitian, or do you go to the dietitian, does the test, and then you go to
the dietitian who does the test? You go to the dietitian who does the test, and it's not just dietitians who do it. There's a lot of functional medicine doctors who are doing it. So we've got, there's quite a large network of people who are actually doing the test, but you would go to the practitioner to find out a bit more about the test and get the test done. They will take your history as well, because don't forget, your genes are your genes, but you also need your environment plus your genes to actually equal the effect. So they need to find out a history, your environment, what's going on around you, to see, if that genetic change actually has an impact on your life. You might have a gene that's going to put you at risk for, I don't know, or a few genes that are going to put you at risk for poor detoxification, but you are eating a lot of green leafy veg, you don't have a lot of toxins in your body, and your environmental factors are in your favor. So the likelihood that those genes are actually going to have an effect is much less than someone who would be having, charred blackened foods, smoking, taking a lot of medication, not eating vegetables. So it's important to know one's environment as well.
So very quickly, Sam wants to know, can you microwave things like tomatoes and still keep the good nutrients in them?
A tricky question. I'm actually not sure. My answer would be yes, because you're still, you're heating it to activate it. Whether microwaving food is going to bring out the full potential of any food product, I don't think so. I would say there's other cooking methods that are probably more beneficial. But in terms of like the lycopene and microwaving, I haven't read research about that, but certainly, microwaving food in general possibly not the best form of cooking the food.
And Patrick wants to know the role of metformin. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly in weight loss.
So, I mean, metformin is a medication, and I'm sure Professor Noakes would be able to speak more about this as well. But metformin is a medication given for blood sugar control to diabetic patients, especially to type 2 diabetic patients. Metformin is probably one of the first drugs. Metformin is a glucophage that one would be giving to someone to manage their insulin levels and to manage their blood sugar levels. So certainly it can help with weight loss. One would, often people are on metformin, like females. I know a male asked, I think it was a male who asked this question, possibly. But metformin is also one of the medications given to ladies with polycystic ovarian syndrome as well. One would need to also look at the vitamins that they're taking in there, because it affects vitamin B12 absorption. So, And
I assume it would actually need to be prescribed as well. So
100%. It's not an over-the-counter drug that you're going to be getting.
So, Dina, I know the time has gotten very late and we'll have lots of questions. Some of our panelists need to go. We probably have about 5 minutes before we need to wrap up. So maybe if any of our panelists are still with us and not asleep, maybe we can ask them to turn on their cameras and answer. Tim, have you been looking at all of these questions coming in with so many of them relate to what you were telling us in the beginning?
No, I haven't been checking them. So
give
a few minutes to answer some.
Give us some quick advice. Healthy gut. What should people be eating or doing to get the best healthy gut? That's a question from Sandy.
I think the other three speakers addressed that question. I'm not the expert there.
All right, so guys, probiotics we're talking about, and there are ones that come in the fridge, and there are ones that come in the like on a normal bottle, like the 9 strain. Which any of you can take this? So Nicqi's got her hand up. Which probiotic should we be taking?
So a lot of research is actually showing that probiotics are only useful while we are taking them. So we should be actually fueling our gut microbiome with good quality food rather than focusing too much on a probiotic. The other research articles showed that taking a probiotic after an antibiotic actually slowed down your gut microbiome reestablishment. So I think what is more important is that we should be looking at foods that naturally encourage your microbiome, like Hilit mentioned, yogurt, fermented foods, kimchi, sauerkrauts, all of those, pickles. Unless obviously you have a histamine overload problem, then those are the kinds of foods that we want to encourage. And variety in your vegetables and fruits. If you are doing the fruits, getting variety gives those different bacteria the foods that they need to establish themselves.
Okay, let's move on to another. Tim, you said dairy in your diet. Tarryn, you said no dairy. Give us 10 seconds each on why that's your view.
Well, dairy is very nutrient dense, so it's a very good food, and it provides lots of the vitamins some of the vitamins that are missing. If you want to keep your bones strong, etc. So that's why it's important. But if you are dairy intolerant, that's fine. Again, as we said, nothing fits everybody. But for a majority of people, dairy is a very good form of food.
Tarryn, your view?
Sure. So dairy, one of our things is it's quite pro-inflammatory. So it's more from an inflammatory perspective. And, that's where you get your intolerances and stuff like that. So for us, it's definitely in terms of when we're doing a calorie controlled, obviously there's calories in your dairy. So from that perspective, but then also the pro-inflammatory markers that it may have. So we prefer then, dairy alternatives, your soy or your almond, those sort of things.
What's your view on that? Sorry.
Can I just add something? I'm really excited that all the dietitians, the doctors spoke about insulin resistance. Now, had we had this discussion 10 years ago, not one of them would have said insulin resistance has any role, and they would all have said, I suspect that carbohydrates are very important, because that's what most.
I disagree. I've been practicing insulin resistance for 20 years. That's and in fantastic. Fact, my colleague Ann Till wrote one of the most kind of forward thinking books in terms of insulin resistance at the time.
Well, that's very interesting because she was very aggressive towards me. So that's interesting that she should have been that. But sorry, but my point is, when we have this meeting in 5 years' time, we will be discussing the role of visceral fat in inflammation.
Yeah.
You've got to cut the visceral fat. It doesn't matter what else you do, all those anti-inflammatory products. If you've got visceral fat, your body will be inflamed, whatever else you're eating. And the only way you can get rid of visceral fat is to reduce your carbs and reduce your insulin. So the message that I would like to give is, first, if you want to address inflammation and antioxidants and so on, you address visceral fat. Once you've got that down, then you can talk about these as being the extra bit on the cherry on the top. But unless you address the visceral fat, the cherry on the top doesn't work. That's
I'm in
what
agreement.
Yeah.
Great.
This is unusual. We have an entire agreement.
There's a question on laxatives. Are they good or bad for you?
Bad.
Do you want
bad?
Bad for you.
Bad. Okay.
It's
cool.
Just bad. I'll just leave it with that. Bad for you.
Tarryn, you spoke a lot about sleep, and in fact, Hilit's mother wants to know: is there a thing as oversleeping?
Interesting. There is a thing, Howard, as oversleeping, because too much sleep can also affect your appetite and those sort of things, and your ability to exercise. It affects your whole circadian rhythm and your hormone secretion as well. So if someone came to me and they were oversleeping, one of the things that I would then look at is why they're oversleeping. What is making them oversleep? Is it just that they have a sedentary lifestyle, or are there any underlying medical conditions that are making them oversleep? It's not normal for us to sleep excessively. Our body should, ultimately in a real world be in homeostasis where, 7 to 8 hours sleep is sufficient. They say anything over 8.5 to 9 is oversleeping. And then, it can become a negative thing when you do oversleep, and you want to look at why.
Okay. And Nicqui, maybe these are for you, but we have a few questions about diet and Alzheimer's disease and diet and autism. Is there any link between any of that?
100%. And it also boils down to some of your genetic pathways and the methylation of your B vitamins in a lot of those pathways, as well as inflammation, oxidative damage, which is basically own body rusting. So if you're not giving your body the antioxidant potential it needs with the good quality dark green leafy vegetables, if nobody goes away with that message, dark green leafy vegetables, then they didn't hear anything tonight. So absolutely, they play a huge role, as the good quality fats, especially with the Alzheimer's disease.
And insulin resistance is a high key predictor of Alzheimer's disease and so on. And
Alzheimer's is considered type 3 diabetes.
Yeah.
So 100%, yes.
I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah.
Tim, the last question from me, and then I'm going to shut up and leave it all to Dina. But a few questions have come in relating to the cost of kind of following a low carbohydrate diet, particularly in South Africa, where a lot of people survive on really very minimal amounts of money, and their main staple meals are bread or pap or other carbohydrates. How do you actually live a good, healthy diet on a low cost?
Okay, so my foundation promotes the Eat Better South Africa campaign, which looks specifically at the poorest communities in the country. And you can have a low carbohydrate diet on 30 Rand a day. Now, I know that's a lot of money for many people, but it's not 300 Rand a day. So it is possible, but you've got to get hold of eggs and milk and fish. In tinned fish is one of a really good nutrient. Offal and offcuts of meat and offcuts of fish. Those are the sorts of things that you can do it. And vegetables, of course. Vegetables are not usually all that expensive and are usually grown in these communities. It can be done, but governments don't want to push it because they've got the agenda. They're bought by the highly processed food industry. The highly processed food industry controls government, so the dietary advice that you get is controlled. And it's got to be cereals and grains, and it's not going to be the low carb diet, and the cereals and grains are subsidized. And so that's, if they subsidize other foods, it might help bring the price of food down.
Tim, is there a website that people can look at in order to get advice on the low-cost version of your diet?
Sure, the Noakes Foundation. If you guys go look at the Noakes Foundation, that's on the website there.
Dina, I promise I won't say another word.
Why are the Chinese so thin?
They're not. They've got the highest number of people with diabetes. It's because they used to eat diets which were low in sugar, low in processed foods, low in vegetable oils, and then they got the McDonald's burgers and they started eating the highly processed foods, which are highly addictive, and they went the way of the rest of the world. Yeah.
Okay.
So you can eat your cereals and grains if you're eating few of them and you're not eating the other rubbish. I keep wanting to emphasize that satiety is the key. You've got to find the foods that satiate you. That's the key. Once you do that, we reversed diabetes in a whole group of people who just read the book. And then we investigated them and we found out that the one key driver was then they lost their food. They weren't looking for food all the time. They were satiated. And those were the ones who reversed their diabetes. It had nothing to do with glucose control. It had nothing to do with medication. It was they found the foods that satiated them. And that's the key. You cannot have food cravings. If you have food cravings, you cannot control what you eat. And you'll eat ultra-processed food, and all these problems that have been brilliantly described tonight will happen. So the key is you've got to find the real foods that satiate you. And once you do that, you'll never have a problem again. And it's highly sustainable.
Fantastic. And so there's just a question here. Let us know, you were talking about the genetic test. So someone's asked, what is the cost of genetic testing? Are your mutes on? Sorry.
But if I'm not mistaken, I think Nicqui can correct me. I think it's 4,500 Rand.
4,400 through a practitioner. If they do buy the 3x4 genetics online, it's 5,500 because it includes a practitioner consultation. If you buy it through the practitioner, it doesn't include your consultation with the practitioner. So just be aware that you will still be billed for consultancy fees.
Okay, and someone's quickly just asked nutrition for menopause. Who wants to take that in particular? Because there's a whole view as well on your hormones. So, I mean, I don't know if you see on Instagram and all of that, there are all these ads all the time. There's the trainers that come on and they say, this person ran for however many miles a day and lost nothing and whatever. So they say there's a huge influence of hormones and obviously unique genetics, etc. He'll let you're nodding, so I'm going to make you answer.
No, I mean, Nicqui could probably answer it better, but we actually had an interesting webinar about male and female hormones the other day and how it affects eating and risk for cardiovascular disease and insulin resistance from two professors, I think, in the United States. It was very interesting. I think, Nicqui, you would probably answer this one.
Yeah, so again, it boils down to how we're processing our hormones, what our insulin, remember, is a hormone. So if we're processing insulin incorrectly or we're eating incorrectly, it's going to influence all the other hormones. I always stress to my patients that remember that your endocrine system is a system on purpose. So if one hormone is affected, all of them are going to be affected. And the fact that women are losing the protective influence of estrogen going into menopause, or progesterone, or both progesterone and estrogen, there is an impact, a kind of a catalyst impact on other hormones as well. So I often find it's insulin resistance again.
Okay, and Tarryn, you also at Skin Renewal, you do the IVs, and you actually suggested in your presentation where you actually get vitamin injections or vitamin drips, which has become quite a big trend we've seen like globally. So just tell us a little bit about that. Mute's also on.
I think, Dina, there are quite a lot of fads that are out there, and you have to consider whether vitamin infusions is one of those. Everyone has an infusion bar, this and that, but research is there. You've got to look at your water soluble vitamins, you've got to look at your other, but it's also elements, it's magnesium, it's your zinc, it's your vitamin D's or B's, or all of those ones that we might not be getting enough in our diets. And it's trying to supplement with those. And, you know, initially, to be honest, I was a little bit skeptical. You know, I'm medical trained. Here we are giving a water soluble IV. You know, it's just going to pass out in your urine. But I must say, I mean, I had one yesterday. So, you know, it just shows it's becoming hugely popular, whether there's a placebo effect or not, but people are feeling really great on them. So there will be ones for antioxidants, your glutathione, those sort of things, you know, your vitamin C's, your magnesium. So yeah, just some of the vitamins that people are finding difficult to supplement in diet. Sure, like Colette said, diet is so important. And, you know, I wish we could achieve everything in our diet, but some of the times we do need supplementation with that. And yeah, people are finding good responses, good results, even if it's skincare, gut health, those sort of things. So yeah, there's definitely a big talk and hype about IV infusions at the moment. And I don't think it's, you know, without reason. Yeah.
Great. So sorry, I know we've had so many questions tonight. There's been so much interest. You guys have shared so much. I think everyone's saying that they've learned so much. The feedback on the chat is fantastic. I think, is there anything anyone would like to add that they feel we haven't covered, that they feel there absolutely needs to be known for our audience? Because I think time is late and we appreciate all of your time. Is there anything else that you would like to add? Have we said it all? Guys, you're such an agreeing panel. It's absolutely fantastic. So
yeah, I would just say thank you. I really enjoyed it. And thanks to the expert panelists. It was lovely to hear their point of view and to see that there's growing agreement in many areas. I hope it's never full agreement. We wouldn't want that.
I just have to tell you that the best comment I heard tonight, I just have to find it. It was actually to you, Professor Noakes. It said that if you knew that the problems actually all started with eating animals. 105 this time, you still realize that. Oh, sorry, I couldn't resist that comment.
So thanks very much. I must rush off now. And just thanks, everyone. It was a lovely evening. Thanks, Howard. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Lovely to see you again.
Thanks so much. Thanks.
So Dina, huge thank you to all of our panelists. I think it's been the most informative and educational thing tonight, but it's also been very practical. So I'm going to go and cut my cruciferous. How do I say that again, Hilly? Cruciferous. Leave them for 90 minutes and then I'll lightly fry them a little later. But Dina, thank you so much for putting this panel together. It's been such an amazing evening and so informative. And we'll see you hopefully fairly soon together with a new member of your family.
Indeed. But thank you all to the panelists. We know time is late. I think we really all learned a lot. And I'm really I'm glad that everyone agrees. It's so enlightening, just that. So thank you all. And if anyone wants to leave comments, I mean, we're getting a lot of comments here in the chat section. So please feel free. We're going to leave it on for a little bit longer. So please feel free if you've enjoyed it, if you've learned stuff. Thank you to Hillet, to Tim, to Dr. Tarryn, to Nicqui. You've been fantastic and your expertise is so appreciated. So everyone just have a good evening and thank you, Howard.
And we'll see you again Thursday evening. A good yontif to everyone who's busy celebrating Shavuot, which starts tomorrow night, and it will be Monday and Tuesday. We'll be back on Thursday evening talking about how do we live with crumbling infrastructure around ourselves. And then we've got some very exciting ones coming up as well. One of which we're going to do is actually on sleep. And sleep has played an important part tonight, but we've gone to get experts from around the country and the world to talk about sleep and good sleep hygiene, which is coming up on the 27th, if I'm not mistaken. So to everyone, a huge thank you. Please join our patron campaign. We'll see you on Thursday night. Thank you for joining us around the world this evening. And thank you to a magnificent, magnificent panel. Cheers. See you all. Bye.
Thank you.